relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories that they have traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and all that live on, in, and above it. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the Indigenous peoples for many generations who have taken care of this place and who continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take action towards real truth and reconciliation. Miigwech. Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? Seeing none, does anybody sign up for open forum? No. Then we're going to go into the Municipal Act. Municipal Act public meetings. And that would be, I don't need a speech for that one, do I? Yes, I do. Okay, well, there is a speech on the bottom. Okay. This morning, there is a public meeting scheduled for 2 Shore Road closing applications. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom the notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed road closings being considered. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide for any other information that is relevant to the applications, and staff will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to speak and provide comments to the bylaw being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name and address. Council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to the Municipal Act of 2001 C-25 as amended to deal with the following proposed Shore Road closing bylaws. R23-04 for 90 Blueberry Lane and R24-01 for 34 Heron Point Road. To our clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was published in a newspaper, and notice was sent to the abutting neighbors in the close proximity of the property at least 30 days prior to today's meeting.
Thank you. And to our Deputy Clerk, Ms. Levesque.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The first Shore Road Allowance application this morning is R23-04 for 90 Blueberry Lane. The application was received on October 3rd, 2023. The Shore Road Allowance has been requested by the applicants to build a boathouse located on the Shore Road Allowance. The frontage of the Shore Road Allowance is 54.73 linear meters at a cost of $242 per linear meter for a total purchase price of $13,244.66 plus HST. The property is zoned Shoreline Residential Type 1, and there are no open building permits on file. We have an image of the location map here. Oh, sorry, my camera's not on. Let me just start my video. There we go. And an aerial image of the subject lands and a sketch of the property, as well as the registered plan. I believe Mr. Chen is online here, so I can pull him over if you have any questions for the applicant or myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, the applicant is present?
That's correct. I'm just pulling him over now.
All right. I don't know if the applicant had any comments to make. Oh, all right. Let's go then turn this over to council. Council, any comments or questions? Councillor Bocek, please.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, my only comment on this file would be that it was requested by council that any maps or illustrations would show the body of water and name the body of water depicted, and here it doesn't. It is mentioned, but not in the illustration, so it'd just be easier if it said Go Home Bay or Little Lake or what body of water we're dealing with here in the illustrations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I have moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that council passed the closing bylaw 2024-065 to stop up, close, and convey part of the original Shore Road Allowance lying in front of Lot 23, Concession 7, being Part 1, Plan 35R-27307, formerly Baxter, now in the Township of Georgian Bay, 90 Blueberry Lane, for the purchase price of $13,244.66 plus HST. And that council passed deeming bylaw 2024-066, part of Plan M243, formerly Township of Baxter, now in the Township of Georgian Bay, the District Municipality of Muskoka, not to be registered plan of subdivision for the purpose of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13S53. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Well,
Sorry, through you, Your Worship. There's someone in the attendee list that has their hand up.
Oh,
I'm not sure who they are, so I don't know if I should pull them over and allow them to speak.
well, we've already passed this. I don't know if that was the applicant or not. Okay.
Hi, this is the applicant on behalf of 90 Blueberry Lane. I don't think I hold my hand up, so this is I think something in favor. So I think we can pass that.
No, it has been passed.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. Next is application to close Shore Road Allowance R24-01. Ms. Levesque.
The application was received on January 2nd, 2024. The applicant is making the application to allow for future development. The frontage of the shoreline is 46.83 linear meters at a cost of $242 per linear meter for a total purchase price of $11,332.86 plus HST. The property is zoned 6 Mile Lake Residential, which is on 6 Mile Lake. There are 3 open building permits on file for a sleeping cabin demolition, septic system, and a garage. We have an image here of the location map of the subject lands, as well as an aerial image. And the survey of the property. As you can see, part of the dwelling is located on the Shore Road Allowance. And then I'm not sure if Mr. Pearson is in attendance, but if he is, I will pull him over. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't see anybody by that name on the list. So I will turn it over to council and ask council if they have any questions or comments with regards to this application. And I'm not seeing any hands. So I have moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Graziano. Be it resolved that council pass closing bylaw 2024-067 to stop up, close, and convey part of the original Shore Road Allowance lying in front of Broken Lot 18, Concession 16, being parts 2, 3, 4, Plan 35R-27477, formerly Baxter, now in the Township of Georgian Bay, in the District Municipality of Muskoka, 34 Heron Point Road, for the purchase price of $11,332.86 plus HST. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And I believe that is it for the Municipal Act public meetings. So now we're going to go into the Planning Act public meetings portion of our meeting. This morning, there are 3 public meetings scheduled for 2 official plan amendments and 3 proposed zoning bylaw amendments. I'll briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendments being considered. The clerk will also advise of the appeal procedures. Next, staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide any other information that is relevant to the applications, and the clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the amendments being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name and address and sign in on the sheet provided. And if anybody's, there is a sheet on the table in front if you come up. After the public discussion, council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Section 22 and Section 34 of the Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendments. The official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment files O23-06 and Z23-19 for 117 Port Severn Road. Zoning bylaw amendment file 24-06 to Island 850 Georgian Bay. And official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment files O24-02 and Z24-02 for 144 6 Mile Channel Road. To our clerk.
Notice of the public meetings was sent by first-class mail to their respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property subject to the proposed applications, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the applications. These notices were sent at least 30 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed applications, and a key map showing the location of the properties or a description of the lands to be affected by the proposed amendments. Other relevant information may have also been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay Official Plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on these applications, that any subsequent appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment must submit a written request to the planning department.
Thank you. Our first application is official plan and zoning bylaw amendment number. The first public meeting is for proposed official plan amendment O23-06 and zoning bylaw amendment Z23-19. The clerk will now provide an update on correspondence received.
Correspondence relating to the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment files O23-06 and Z23-19 was received as follows. One letter of correspondence was received from the District of Muskoka stating that district staff would not be opposed to the approval of the above noted applications, provided the proposed bylaw is amended to include a holding H2 symbol. Removal of the H should only be considered when the following provisions have been fulfilled, and that is availability of water and sewer capacity be confirmed to the satisfaction of the District of Muskoka. One letter correspondence was received from Brad Socash, the Operations Department, recommending further analysis by the traffic engineer at Ainley to confirm the comparable provided by Tatum. One letter correspondence was received from the Ministry of Transportation stating no comment. One letter correspondence was received from Kelly Nicholson, Chief Building Official, stating no comment. One letter correspondence was received from Kat Graydon stating concerns with increasing max density. One letter correspondence was received from Tony Van Dam of the Fire Department with a list of recommendations as follows. 1. The concept design should clearly show or describe further to the attached drawing. The proposed fire route clearly accesses along all buildings fronting the internal driveways where it might either be by driveways or clear travel routes for fire trucks, a fire hydrant, a walk-on covered walkway roof so that emergency personnel can have egress via ladders and covered walkway roofs to the terraces, and heights from the proposed grade for all points of emergency access. 2. The final design discussed during the site plan control should discuss the structure, parking, internal fire equipment, and emergency accesses, snow storage and removal details to keep fire routes clear, and sprinklers in units. Further, council is to be aware that the concept plan requires operational improvements, being additional equipment such as a ladder truck and training regarding the parking, structures with dwellings above, and training for firefighting in buildings this size and design.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to Messrs. Whitlib and Krafke, who are on this file for their report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kutsier. With your permission, I'll share my screen. When I find where it's gone, they've moved it. Yep. I apologize for that. Your worship, councilors, and everyone in attendance today online, good morning. My name is Jeff Kratke. This is Derek Whitlam. We're both registered professional planners employed by the Township of Georgian Bay. The location of the subject lands, both within the township on the left-hand side and more succinctly on Port Severn Road North, are shown on the screen right now. The agent for the application, which proposes a redevelopment of 117 Port Severn Road North, is MHBC, represented by Jamie Robinson. The purpose of the application O2306 is for the subject lands to propose amendments to subsection E.4.1.3.2 in the official plan for the Township of Georgian Bay, increasing maximum density from 40 to 53 units per gross hectare. The purpose of application Z2319 is for the subject lands to amend the Township of Georgian Bay zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended regarding number 1, the zoning map 150 in Schedule A, rezoning the subject lands from tourist commercial type 1, CT1 zone to residential multiple type 2 with a special site-specific exception holding provision as well, RM2 XXHXX for now zone. And number 2, to amend table 9.4 and subsection 9.4 to include special requirements and provisions, A, notwithstanding subsections 4.14 and 4.41, decreasing the minimum front yard and shoreline setback from 20 to 19.5 meters. B, decreasing the minimum rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 3.5 meters. C, increasing the maximum density from 30 units per hectare to 53 units per hectare. D, decreasing the minimum number of parking spaces from 2 to 1.52 per dwelling. And E, allowing covered walkways with a maximum width of 3.75 meters, maximum height of 4.5 meters, and minimum setback from the lot lines of 0.4 meters. And lastly, number 3, table 18.1 in subsection 18.1.2 be amended to include a site-specific holding XX provision for the purposes of including the hold 6 provision and continued peer review discussions regarding fish habitat, bat habitat, construction mitigation for those habitats, age of the environmental impact study, and functional servicing and stormwater management. The site subject lands are better shown on the survey plan that was submitted on behalf of the application. These are the existing buildings on the property. The Muskoka official plan designates the subject lands and the adjacent lands within the Port Severn Urban Center full service area. Some of the adjacent lands are still in the future service area. However, again, all of the subject lands are in the full service area. There are, of course, other matters that are concerned with in the MOP, and they have been addressed through the consultants, through the agent's submission of expert reports. The natural constraints on the subject property or the subject lands is essentially a type 1 fish habitat located immediately adjacent to the subject lands in Little Lake. There are hazard lands in the area. However, none of these are of concern given the information provided by the peer review experts as well as the consulting experts for the application. Importantly, the Georgian Bay official plan designates this property as residential, which means under our official plan, it already has permission for residential densities of up to 40 units per net hectare. The adjacent lands are either, generally speaking, in a commercial designation or in a mixed-use designation and are intended to reflect similar densities of development, but obviously for different land uses. The Georgian Bay official plan also speaks to the consistency with the urban design guidelines for the Port Severn Village. And the Port Severn Village urban design guidelines plan for this part of Port Severn to become a village center. And we are currently located approximately here in one of the anchors of that village center, which is the town square, being made up of the building we're in, the library, the Brissette House, etc. The park with the boat ramp and other facilities is located here. It's another anchor, very important to the Port Severn Village Center. You will see Port Severn Road North is one of the important parts of it that lead to other anchors at the other end of the village center, being the inn and the lock. Along the way, the guideline intends that an urban street begin to take shape, which is the new village center for Port Severn. And this plan has been around since 2009 and was reaffirmed when the 2014 official plan was approved by council. The property is currently in the CT1 zone, and that reflects its use as a cottage facility rented out on short-term basis. The adjacent lands are generally either marinas, hotels, or residential, with one exception, which is an industrial property located a short distance to the east, approximately, of the subject lands. However, that industrial designation, despite the fact that it appears to be immediately adjacent to the subject lands, is, for all intents and purposes, misleading, given that the part of the industrial zone that is adjacent to the subject lands is submerged below the Little Lake, which is a federally regulated waterway. As well, it's only light industrial or class 1, and so most of the setback distance is actually managed on its own property. You can better see the state of the existing development along Port Severn Road North on this Google satellite image. It is clearly not yet what is planned. It is not a village center. It is largely a mixture of private residential homes and marinas with a lot of open land that remains naturally vegetated. The third design concept came out of the very significant public comments that were received at the first public meeting. And it does vary from the second design concept that was committed or considered at that meeting. Essentially, it adds a great deal more parking by changing the orientation of the approximately southwesterly most proposed building on the subject lands. It also changes the entrances to the parking structure, which again benefits from the topography of the land, where although it on the private driveway would be at grade, on Port Severn Road, it is essentially below grade with the exception of the far southeastern corner, where given the grade of Port Severn Road, that structure starts to become visible to Port Severn Road as well. And the entrances to these garages are now here. Oops. The entrances to these garages are now at the ends of the building. And the parking spaces you can see below each unit, there are essentially, most cases, four parking spaces inside this parking structure that is below the 2 layers of stacked townhouse units. Of course, we've received concerns from the fire chief that there needs to be some additional work done on this site plan, and the agent, I'm sure, will speak to that in more detail. Now I'll turn it over to Derek.
Thank you, Jeff. Through the mayor to Planning Council. So as you've heard, Jeff's done an excellent summary of the policy framework and the vision for the Port Severn Village Center. And there's certainly aspects of this proposed development that would appear to fulfill that village. The recommendation from staff at this time, and maybe if we can proceed to the next slide, is for a deferral. Essentially, and I'm going to just go right to paragraph 3. The township staff shall schedule the next meeting of council to evaluate the applications at the earliest date after all outstanding comments from the District of Muskoka and the parking peer review are addressed by the agent and owner to the satisfaction of township staff. You've heard from the comments that the clerk summarized. There are some comments that require some attention at the site plan approval stage, such as the details that the fire chief is seeking, some comments related to the natural heritage peer review. However, there are still some substantive comments that, in staff's opinion, need further exploration at this point. We've heard that the District of Muskoka has no objection. They've provided some language with respect to some provisions to be incorporated in the language surrounding the holding provision. And we think that's largely resolved, but it's something that needs to be refined. But more significantly, the outstanding matter that from planning staff's perspective requires additional attention is the parking peer review. So you've heard comments from the Director of Operations, and they speak to the peer review comments that have been received from the township's peer review consultant. Additional details have come in since the director provided those comments, and essentially it comes down to the justification for the proposed parking. So you've heard from Mr. Kratke that the proposed parking rate is 1.52 spaces per unit. That's a departure from what the RM2 zone requires, which is 2 spaces per unit. However, I think it's worth pointing out that while it's an exception to the RM2 zone that's being sought, the proposed development, its arrangement, the residential pods, I'll call them, and the common parking areas function more like an apartment or condominium apartment type complex. And if we were to look at it through that lens, what the zoning bylaw requires for apartment uses is 1.5 spaces per unit plus 0.75 spaces per unit for visitor parking. 0.5, 0.25. 0.25, sorry, for a total of 1.75 per unit. So I think the more comparable is to look at it, the departure from 1.75 spaces per unit to the proposed 1.52 spaces per unit. In support of that approach, the applicant's consulting engineer and their traffic team have provided justification, and they provided some proxy or comparable sites, particularly in Gravenhurst, to demonstrate that parking at that rate can function and it function well. Where there's still some refinement required, and while some of the discussion is academic, it's still important, is that the township's peer review consultant is still looking for some details in order to validate that those comparable sites in Gravenhurst are in fact comparable, and that we are comparing apples to apples in terms of the sites themselves, the urban context around them, the services around them, etc. So some work is still required there. The peer reviews, our peer review consultant is not entirely aligned with the position of the applicant's engineer on the parking piece at this point in time. So it's from that perspective, particularly the parking piece, that we are asking that this be brought forward at a future meeting when that matter has been addressed.
All right, well, thank you very much. Is the applicant or their agent wanting to make any presentation at this point? Mr. Mr. Robinson, would that be you?
That would be me. Thank you, Your Worship. And I apologize to council that I'm not able to be there today. I actually have an OLT hearing at 10 o'clock. So hopefully I can be efficient with everybody's time here today. But thanks again for providing the opportunity to speak. I believe Mr. Kratky and Mr. Whitlib have done a great job explaining the amendments and explaining the proposal. Obviously, this is the second public meeting for this application. There's just a couple of additional points that I'd like to provide some added clarity on. I did have a presentation prepared, but I'm not sure I need to, actually, maybe I'll just share my screen briefly. There's only a couple of slides that I think I need to refer to. I think Mr. Kratky and Mr. Whitlib have covered off the basis very well. So I'll just share my screen if you'll allow me to. So we'll just jump ahead here. Can you see my screen okay there?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay as well? Just
Yep. Everybody's nodding their head in the room.
okay. Just wanted to make sure there's two different mics and I'm not always sure which one's the correct one. So thank you for that. I'll just jump ahead here. So just providing a summary of the earlier proposals and the changes that were made. We did prepare an addendum to our original report to address the changes, specifically the items related to parking, the waterfront itself, and the connection between Port Severn Road and the development. Those are sort of the three main commenting areas that we heard come out of the first public meeting. So as far as the parking goes, as mentioned, we've modified the site design to increase the parking from 1.25 to 1.5 spaces per unit. And that's mainly been achieved by taking this, the building that's located in this area and shifting it over closer to the road, which has opened up some additional parking in this area of the site. And I'll just show you what that, so this is the revised proposal. As you can see, there's been additional parking added here. Some parking has been removed from this portion, and we've got really a consistent streetscape along Port Severn Road. So that's addressed two of the primary concerns, one related to parking and the second related to the connection between Port Severn Road and in the development. And we believe it provides more of an urban context around Port Severn Road, which is aligned with the direction of the planning documents and the community master planning, plan for this area. As also mentioned, additional underground parking spaces have been realized as a result in the change in entrance location. So there's some added benefit there. And we've also, the final area of modification or final area of consideration relates to the waterfront. There were some questions at the previous public meeting about what's proposed for the waterfront. We've clarified that what's proposed is effectively what's existing. So recognizing the existing docking structures, the existing pool area, and the existing amenity space in the front yard of the development or in the waterfront, adjacent to the waterfront, through the proposal. So those, we believe that we've taken a good hard look at the comments that have been provided, that we've addressed those comments. It was unfortunate that the peer review comments from the parking side of things weren't received in the time that was required to meet the deadline for this public meeting, but I can assure you we're willing to work and to work with municipal staff and the peer review consultant to try to get a resolution on that parking issue. I would finally just like to say that if council is satisfied that we've addressed the comments to the satisfaction of council based on what was provided at the previous public meeting, and council is in agreement with the 1.5 parking ratio for the site. You do have the draft official plan amendment and bylaw in the application package, and you do have the ability, if you're comfortable in considering these applications for approval today as well. So if not, then they would likely come back to the next meeting in August with a final recommendation report from staff. So with that, your worship, that concludes my presentation, but I thank everybody for their time today. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer those. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And council, we weren't going to go to public before I go to council. So those who've stuck your hands up already, you'll have to be patient. So are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this application? I'm going to go to the room first, and then if there's anybody online. So anybody in the room wish to comment on this application? Ms. Patey, please come forward, state your name, address, and what you have to say. Oh, and we have to make sure the mic's turned on.
Good morning. My name is Judith Pacey. I live at 135 Port Severn Road North. I am the neighboring residence and only residence on next to this development proposed. I have questions in regards to the 100% density that you're showing on the waterfront. What is that supposed to be? Like right now it isn't anything, and you're saying that it's going to be the front yard to the existing buildings. Is he not there?
Sorry,
Did the Jamie go away?
Mr. Robinson is there.
Sorry. Anyways, I have question as to what the 100% density of what they want to do with that waterfront, because right now it's not active as anything, and they're saying it is going to be the front yard, but it's front yard to what? It's fish habitat. It's not a beach, and the water is quite low, and it's not good for sea doing or large boat traffic. I also have concerns in how these homes are going to be heated, whether we're going to be looking at oversized propane tanks like we do at Oak Bay. I'm concerned about the sidewalks and the amount of light pollution that's going to be emitted during the day and the night, and also with the extent of how many housing units are going to put out the light. I'm concerned about the trees and the rocks that have to be removed that are also neighboring my property and what it could do to my property. I have questions as to Port Severn Road North or South, if it can handle the overflow of the traffic going both ways, adding more residents to our area. Not sure why the pools and the docks are staying, if that's just an attraction to make it a selling feature. And I'm also concerned about Airbnbs overall, what it's going to look like for us as a community, and what the road construction is going to be like, whether or not we'll be closed off. In the last 10 years, Port Severn Road North has been closed more than it's been open due to all the construction. And is this construction going to stop our traffic flow again, and for how long? I think that's all. I also have concerns about the snow removal, garbage pickup, emergency vehicles, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Quite an extensive list of concerns, and which I know at least some of them have been addressed by our planners, but I'm not sure if all of them have.
No, not about pets.
Sorry?
About the animals.
Animals, pets. Okay,
Pets. There's no green space for animals.
thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to this matter? That's not seen anybody else in the room. Is there anybody online who wishes to speak, and can we pass them over, please? Is that you or Sid?
Online is Mrs. Elliott Frazier that I see. I don't have her hand up, but I will bring her over. That's the only person I see for this file. And Jennifer Vita.
Okay. Miss Elliott Fraser, do you wish to speak to this application?
At this time, our big concern is the, are the docking, the whole docking situation and how shallow it is at the front, along the shoreline, and also just the parking issue.
Sorry, the docking and parking?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ms. Vita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually here for a subsequent public meeting for
Okay.
144 6 Mile Channel. Thank you.
All right, well then, all right, is there anyone, no one else has their hand up? All right, then I'm going to now turn it over to council. Councilor Graziano, please.
Thank you, Worship. I think Councillor Bocek had his hand up before I did. Councillor Bocek, did you want to speak before I do, or do you mind? Okay, thank you. First and foremost, Jeff, I really appreciate the thoroughness of your report. I commend you on it. It was very thorough and a great read, and I appreciate your comments as well as Director Whitlib. I have some concerns. Again, I think we articulated some of these concerns in the previous public forum, specifically around density. I believe that there were quite a few comments around density on this development, and I'd mentioned, I think previously as well, that I had some concerns with regards to density, and I'm assuming based on today's comments from the applicants, their planner, that density has not changed. I also echo the parking situation. I wonder how many parking spaces were added, because from the top view, which I believe to be guest parking, because I'm assuming the owners would have below ground parking, nothing has really changed, because based on Jamie's comments, I think some were taken off from the side, but then reapplied into the frontal section or the center section. So I'm wondering, has the total number of parking spaces changed above ground? And if so, by how many? And then of course and I understand that some have been added below ground based on the shift of the frontal portion of the development, and how many below ground were added. So that is a question for the planner, if I may, but allow me to finish so he can perhaps address everything cumulatively for expedience purposes. The next comment that I had is the respect for our environment. Again, I'm seeing some diagrams with regards to kind of what's proposed. I'm not necessarily seeing how and what is going to be done to mitigate impacts to their environment. I understand that shoreline will be preserved and not changed. However, I'd love to see some additions to ensure that the environment is respected. I also, to Judith's point, have some concerns specifically around propane tanks, because the diagram does not allow and or the site diagram doesn't show where the propane tanks will be placed for all the locations, and that is a concern to myself. I'm curious, and to our planners, I'm not sure, perhaps in the previous meeting that we had, was a traffic study conducted? And if so, what were the results of the traffic study? And then lastly, I also echo Judith's concerns with regards to snow removal. Where will the snow be put? How will it be removed? And one final comment, if I can add to it, is with regards to, I guess, development. In our last meeting, I did articulate that I have some concerns with regards to noise, specifically in the abutting property, and hoping that there is a solution to try to mitigate the impacts and the respect for them to be able to live somewhat a normal lifestyle throughout the course of construction. So with that said, that's everything. And over to Jamie as well as to our planning staff for some of the answers. Thank you.
Your Worship, I'd like to speak to that if I could.
Excuse me, please go ahead.
Thank you. So just to, I think, I think I got all those points down, Counselor, so I'll do my best to try to address them in sequence. So firstly, comment related to density. You're correct, the density is not changed from the original proposal. We believe that there's planning justification to support the density that's identified on the site. So we've maintained the density as proposed in the previous iteration. From parking perspective, the parking that's increased as a result of the revisions to the plan, there's two points I'd like to make on that. Firstly, the number of parking spaces inside underground on the previous site plan was 44, and the amount of underground parking on the current site plan is also 44. So I did misspeak when I said the underground number of spaces was increased earlier. In terms of the above ground spaces, the previous number of spaces was 16, and that's been increased to 29. So overall across the site, there's an increase of 13 parking spaces. In addition to that, I just would like to comment that one of the comments or concerns related to overflow parking and people having birthdays or special events and a number of family members coming. And two comments on that. First, these units are relatively small. They're 1 and 2 bedroom units. And secondly, we have explored the opportunity for on-street parking on Port Severn Road. Now, that would not be on-street parking specific to this development. That would apply to any current uses and future uses, but the district has identified that they're open to the consideration of on-street parking along Port Severn Road. And that's something that's also identified as part of the township's master plan. So there is an opportunity to provide that for some level of overflow parking to accommodate both current and future uses in the area. So we believe that the parking aspects have been satisfactorily addressed. Obviously, the district's peer review consultant, the township's peer review consultant has to finalize their review on that piece. But our traffic consultant and parking consultant is satisfied. The next question you had was related to the environment. The municipality did conduct a peer review of the environmental report that was prepared in support of the application, and there was a number of comments that came out of that. In follow-up, in preparation of this meeting, the comments have been addressed from the township's peer review consultant, and the township's peer review consultant has signed off that the proposal conforms to the official plan and all relevant environmental considerations. The next comment was with respect to traffic. There was a traffic study completed, and a peer review of that study has been undertaken, and Port Severn Road and the infrastructure in the area can support the traffic that would be generated as a result of this development. Your next comment related to snow removal. From a snow removal perspective, there are some locations on the site for some limited snow storage to be provided. This is a private site. It's a condominium site, and it's completely normal for snow storage for snow removal to occur in times of large storm events on condominium properties and private properties, and for snow removal to be undertaken. That's a fact of meeting planning targets and meeting density targets within an urban environment. And again, this is a unique site. This is within Port Severn, which is an urban area, and planning documents contemplate urban style developments within this settlement area. The next comment related to noise, and it was either noise or the propane storage tanks, but I'll speak to both of those. Those two matters are site plan matters, and through the site plan process, whatever on-site amenities are required, whether it's snow store, or whether it's propane tanks, or whether it's servicing of the site, and we haven't determined specifically how the sites will be heated, whether it's with electrical or whether it's with a fossil fuel source. But that again is a site plan matter. And your comment related to noise and tree buffering, the use that's proposed on this site is a residential use. The abutting use is also a residential use. So the noise that's anticipated from this site as opposed to the neighboring property are both residential in nature. We're not dealing with a commercial or an industrial site adjacent to a residential site. However, through the site plan process, those items can be considered. I think that covers off your comments unless I've missed any. But in general, I just wanted to make clear of the point that there is a site plan process. These lands are subject to site plan control. So the specific design elements and site considerations are all matters that would be addressed through a site planning process as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crackey, do you also want to reply?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Worship. I agree a great deal with my colleague, but I just want to add a few things. And if I may, Your Worship, may I just clarify with Councillor Graziano that his question with respect to noise is with respect to construction noise? Okay. As I mentioned in the first public meeting to council, it is certainly within council's ability under the Municipal Act to create a bylaw that limits how construction will take place, not just on these lands, but on any lands within the municipality. The Planning Act is weak with respect to its abilities to control how construction takes place, other than with respect to protecting the natural environment. Snow removal typically is something that we would, one other thing with construction that I wanted to add, and this really answers the lady who appeared, who is the neighbor. The intention here is not to change the grade of Port Severn Road in any way, shape, or form, and the services for this development are already in the ground. The intention is to change the boulevard, which currently essentially is a rock cliff down to the existing cottages. So there would be some fill that would be added in the boulevard that would raise the boulevard to the essential level of the road, slightly higher, of course, because you'd have curbs. But there would never be any intention through this concept to actually rip up or change the grade of Port Severn Road. So all of the engineering work has been done on the basis that the grade level of Port Severn Road remains the same. Snow removal is typically something that, again, we get into at site plan control stage. And that's where the difference would be between the concept designs that you're now seeing before council at this stage in the process versus the final design that will be reviewed as a part of site plan control. And it certainly, the concept design certainly poses some challenges for snow removal storage, but they are not, I don't think, insurmountable. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we haven't forgotten it, and our site plan control policies in our official plan are robust. The natural environment is clearly very important on this property. And I agree with what Jamie said, but I do want to add that the reason that we've, as township staff, requested, and the agent did agree to change the holding provision from a specific, from a general holding provision just dealing with the district services to a site-specific holding provision, is to ensure that the continued need for scrutiny regarding the natural environment can take place before the hold is removed. And so that is in the holding, site-specific holding provision. The other reason for the site-specific holding provision, which came very late in the hours before the end of the week before last, was that the district actually wants the township to change the way that that standard provision is worded. And certainly, again, that was acceptable to both the township and to the agent, but isn't yet reflected in this report because the district has not revised their comments that predated that discussion. I think the other important issues with the environment that Councillor Graziano was speaking to was, again, with respect to construction. And again, that is covered off by the holding provision. But also, I think it's important that although the natural shoreline area remains 100% or some slightly lesser amount, that is also still part of the holding provision discussions. And what I think is important for everyone to understand is that type 1 fish habitat exists. The 100% shoreline activity area exists. The more we would play with that existing situation, the more the applicants would play with it, the more likely we are to change the way in which the natural environment functions. However, again, it is still an area of concern that is covered off by the holding provision. And lastly, I just want to add with respect to the parking that there is a definite increase in the outdoor parking. The applicants could actually use their side yards for parking for private driveways. They have not. I think that's important for council to keep in mind because they are trying to be respectful of, I believe, the design guidelines that are before them, which speak to a village center, but speak to a village center that has natural vegetation and feel. So I think everyone to contemplate what the site plan might look like if the two buildings were brought closer together and driveways were U-shaped instead of T-shaped on the side, because I think they might be able to get more parking, but it might also create greater impacts on the neighboring properties. But again, I think what's before council is something that still needs some further thought with respect to a few matters that aren't part of the holding provision. And again, but I hope I've answered the councillor's questions.
Thank you. Councillor Bocek, please.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship, I'd like to thank Judith Pacey for coming in. It's very hard to sit in front of a bunch of professionals and speak. It's very intimidating, and good job by you. And Mr. Mittens, do the same thing. Thanks for coming. Jamie, I have some questions for you. I have a number of questions, but I'm going to do them one at a time if the mayor would let me, so that we can really get some traction on this. Jamie, my first question is, a couple of times you mentioned underground parking. The term underground parking, are you talking about under the building parking or underground parking? Because we have a granite base that would need to be blasted out. And not only that, you have a water table that's quite high being right next to the lake. So when you say underground, do you mean under building?
Through your worship to the councillor, yes, under building, there may be some excavation or some limited blasting required, but I don't know the specific construction element that will be undertaken yet, but there has been studies done to determine exactly how that the type of parking that's being proposed on the site can be supported.
Okay, thank you for that. Following what our planning department is saying here, I think a deferral is probably the preferred method moving forward, because there's a lot of unanswered questions and there's a lot of questions that aren't going to be answered here today. My next question, for example, would be to our fire chief, who's not present today, and I don't know if he's online or not. I don't see him. But anyways, currently there's a swimming pool within the setback from Little Lake, within the front yard setback of Little Lake. And my concern is that, A, in the case of emergency, it is said that the pool has to be pumped empty. Yet the pool cannot be pumped into the lake because it's chlorinated and it's an F1 fish habitat and would cause extreme damage to the environment. And I'm not sure the water from the pool can be put into the sewer system because of it being chlorinated. And so that needs to be addressed. In the case of an emergency, what happens with this pool when it needs to be emptied? And our fire chief can certainly bring us up to speed on that. Question for our planning department. I didn't see any control over the number of rental units within this complex. Could this become 100% Airbnbs? In other words, people would purchase these and then they would be completely rented out like a hotel. And if so, does this pool require a lifeguard? Since they're not residents, they're rentals. So that's something the fire chief would have to enter into as well too. A number of concerns that have been brought up by my fellow councillor, which haven't really been addressed in detail, as well as the residents. Another thing that concerns me is schooling for all these additional units. We have Oak Bay developing into 600 or 700 units. We've got this new project. Do we have the schools? Do we have the facilities to even help accommodate new residents to the area? And I had a really good one here. I'm just going to have to find it in my writing because I write sloppy as can be. Very small. One of my main concerns here, and it has not been addressed at all, is a lot of times a developer will come into our township, purchase a piece of property, go through the planning process, then get the property reappraised, and now the property is worth many times more than what they paid for it. And they take those funds and they go finish developments in other areas, and they leave it empty. We have a case like this sitting in Honey Harbor right now, where the building has become dilapidated. An eyesore is what the public says. I don't agree with that, but shovels in the ground and actually getting this project underway is important to me, because if we give approvals and it sits there for 10 years and does nothing and finances something else, this will be a rat-infested hole that everybody in Port Severn is going to have to put up with. So that's a very big concern of mine as well. So there's lots more questions that come out of this report, and I would really appreciate this councillor would like a deferral so that we get more information and we're more concise with some of the questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions, and actually, I hope I don't wander too far off topic. I'm sure you'll rate me if I do.
I'll do my best.
The first one has to do with this holding provision that's been brought in on this. My understanding of hold provisions was, in order to have them lifted, all that was required was a survey. Now that's what the road we've been going down for quite some time. Now we have this, I think it's a great idea, this holding provision that is being proposed for this project. Is this type of provision something we could be applying in other situations where we currently have H's already on the books?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the short answer, no. Where you've already got some holding symbol in effect, you can't retroactively go back and revisit what conditions you placed on the zone. But for the go forward, absolutely. If council has concerns that they feel the zone proposed is appropriate, but is needed, that further studies or conditions need to be met, then yes, whatever site-specific holding provision council would want to place on a development, whether it's this one or any other one, is absolutely possible.
Thank you. And then the next question is indirectly related. We were talking about how we're going to heat these places and talking about having propane pigs hanging around the development at some point in time. I know heat pumps are also a possible option, but I've also heard that in some jurisdictions, heat pumps are not, well, they're allowed, but they have to be in addition to an approved heating source, being either gas or electric. Do we have a policy specific in that regard?
We do, through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have robust site plan control policies, and my recollection is that we have the ability to deal with those types of issues at site plan control. Where the municipality may be weak is on a bylaw front with respect to that, because it's not specifically the operational issues bridge from the planning and the site planning to the ongoing. And that's where the township, I'm unaware of whether or not we have a bylaw that would deal with the operational issues of heat pumps or other sources on the site after the fact.
But we do have a building code from the province.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ms. Nicholson,
That's a building code through your worship. That is a building code issue. That's where that all comes from, because the way your heat pump works in our cold climate, it doesn't work to the percentage that's supposed to. Therefore, they are allowed, if there is a backup, to maintain the required temperature that the OBC requires for your house.
Thank you.
Councillor Pedko.
Thank you. And through your worship, just a question to the planners, our planners. I don't think Mr. Robinson would be able to answer this question, but the conceptual streetscape for Port Severn that is discussed in the town center, and Mr. Robinson mentioned that the district said that they could be amenable to street parking. From what that street is today to what would be something that would support additional traffic and street parking, how would the district get involved in upgrading and implementing part of the vision of that enhanced streetscape for this development? Because I can't see how we can make decisions on potential street parking if we don't have a plan for enhanced town development from the district.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's clear that the district has moved from being rather surprised that this was a possibility to being willing to discuss it. There is no clear indication, nor would I expect the district would propose to make those sorts of improvements on their own. I think that the applicant has demonstrated through the agent's discussions with us and with the district that they're willing to discuss it, but there's a lot of detail left to be had at the site plan control stage.
And of course, that would whatever the district does with that street would also include the potential for recreational lanes and a much larger discussion than just this development. So I'm just really wondering how you dovetail, or how we would dovetail those two complementary but maybe dependent discussions so that they happen to one conclusion.
So through the mayor to Councillor Predko, further to what Jeff mentioned, so there's certainly opportunities to explore cooperation, the developer for potential improvements in front of their lands. But more broadly speaking, the Port Severn Master Plan and the official plan are planning documents that were approved by the district. So they form the planning and land use guidance. So they create the framework. So for example, if there's capital improvements planned for Port Severn Road by the district, the guiding documents as part of that, whether it's an EA process, etc., would be found in the local planning departments as approved by the district. So obviously there's budgetary discussions, there's all sorts of things that come into play, but the vision has been established. So it would, if let's say Port Severn Road was to be improved or resurfaced, it would really put the shoe on the district's foot to explain why would they maintain a rural cross-section type of road. By rural cross-section, I mean shoulders, no storm sewers, etc. When there is this approved policy framework for a vision for an urban type cross-section with curb, gutter, pedestrian, sidewalks, on-street parking, etc. So it's really the onus is on the district when or if significant capital improvements to Port Severn Road occur, the onus is on the district to conform to the approved planning documents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before I start round two, I personally appreciate all the comments that have been made, and I think obviously some of the observations are going to be part of a site plan. But I want to speak to density, and that to me, that is my biggest single concern. And the reason I mention it is that we're taking a property that, and correct me if I got the wrong numbers, but I believe according to current zoning would allow 28 units on the property, and the proposal is for 48. I think those were the numbers. And I'm concerned because I think we as council have a responsibility to look at the big picture. This property is on basically an island that I'm estimating, and my estimates are basically putting the thumb on it, so you know it's not accurate. But I'm estimating that the island is approximately 20 times the size of this property. Ballpark. Which means that if the whole island is developed to the same density as what's proposed here, we're talking about 1,000 residents on that island, or 1,000 homes on that island. Versus if they stuck to what the zoning allows, we'd be talking about, say, 600 on that island. That's a huge amount of residents, properties on that island when you think about it. And I think that we have to be conscious of the fact that other properties on this island are going to be sold or redeveloped or changed in the future. And we have, for instance, across the road, predominantly forest. But it's not zoned open space or forest. It's zoned residential. It's zoned for potential development. And so to me, I appreciate that all the applicant has done to address some of the concerns that have been put in front of them. I appreciate the trying to increase the parking, but we're still left with 48 units with 70 odd parking spots. I forgot what the exact total was, on 1/20th of the island, and so that to me, that's for me the big hurdle is the proposed density, especially when I look at the island as a whole, the urban, or if you prefer, the downtown Port Severn urban area. And I think the concept of 2009 or whenever it was not contemplating a density anywhere near that. And I think the sketches that I saw reminded me of old villages that you walk down the street and there were some storefronts and there might have been a home on top of it, and things like that. I don't know, and of course we don't have the site plan, but we have these two buildings backing onto Port Severn. And I say backing on to Port Severn because they are, they're designed to face towards the water. And I don't see little sidewalks or entrances on the street. So when you're walking along the street, you're walking along the back of these homes. And to me, that's not a street-friendly face. Also, if you're walking along there, you're not going to see the water except for the narrowest of gaps between two of the units that are on the waterfront. The rest is just going to be solid wall of building. So I have difficulty accepting the idea that this is following the intent of the urban plan design work that it was done 15 years ago, or when, I'm not sure, I might have the wrong date, but prior to the official plan zoning bylaw anyway. So those are my concerns. It's not the idea that they're putting more homes here, not the idea that that this place is being developed. I think, yes, that this is inevitable. I'm just concerned that this will send a message that the rest of the island can be developed at this rate, and that we will in the next 10, 15 years have 1,000 units on that island. And I don't think that is respecting the intent of the urban design, or what I think most of the neighborhood or township would like to see. Councillor Hazelton.
Planning department, you've done a stellar job. Thank you. Steph. Your walking us through this report was very helpful for me to better understand things. I'm personally less concerned with density and more concerned about the guardrails, if you will, of what that density impact is in the community. You've heard me express concerns in the past about parking. If we have a zoning bylaw that says 2 and we're down to 1.5, I look at that as a big gap. I did hear that there's some proposed or number that we should be looking at is 172. I'm not sure where that came from, but I still have a problem with parking. And the comparators of Gravenhurst, well, you know, if somebody is living in this new development and they don't have a car, how are they going to get a taxi? We don't have taxis. How are they going to get an Uber? I mean, the population of Gravenhurst is what, 5 times what our population or 4 times what our population is. And certainly there are going to be Ubers and taxis and things like that available in Gravenhurst, but not here. So getting around, I think, is going to be a big issue. And I'm not sure the comparators and the parking slots make any sense whatsoever to me. I'm delighted that our neighbor has come and talked to us about her concerns with the waterfront, what's going to happen. And I will hark back to my previous term on council, where we had a massive development of trailers planned with 0 waterfront plan to consider. And our neighbor has said, well, you know, all the docks are being left there, presumably, you know, to be impressive or whatever, but it's an F1 fish habitat. Shouldn't there be a defined waterfront plan that is part of this? Because what are these humans going to do in these buildings? If they want to look out over the water, are they then going to want a boat? Are those boats then going to occupy the docks and come in and out of this F1 habitat and destroy the F1 habitat? I mean, these are questions that I'm not sure have been answered yet. Perhaps sometimes you don't get an answer to a question until you ask it very explicitly. But I think that absent from this application so far is a clear waterfront plan so that we have the full picture. I applaud all of your focus on things like traffic and all the other things. And you've done a great job of moving the parking huge gap from 125 to at least 152. But you know, if our goal is 2, I think we're missing the boat there. So as I say, I think the concept of the project is inevitable. We are going to face this kinds of development asks in our township over and over and over again. I think we just need to figure out how do we do this so it fits. Anyway, that's my focus.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank my fellow councillor for bringing up the lack of waterfront plan that has been presented here. And we saw that with the previous development that he mentioned. And I think it's a part of the planning regiment that why involve a waterfront plan when it's going to be the most controversial and stall things for the longest, when if you get approval to build the buildings and then you can address the waterfront plan later because it's a necessity because we have these buildings and we don't have dockage. So I would like to see in the future that a full report come, including a waterfront plan, so that we have a more precise concept of what is going to be sitting there and we can make our decisions based on a full plan. So thank you, Councillor Hazelton, for bringing that up. Secondly, I wanted to reach out to Councillor Cooper and our mayor to ask, am I imagining things, or did we not approve at the district a speed reduction on Port Severn Road and delineators put down the middle of the road to control traffic speed? And I know that was approved at CAPS, and I believe it was approved at council too. So I'm going to ask our planning department to reach out to district and get an update on what was decided at district council for the road improvements to Port Severn Road. Immediate, like this is supposed to be happening now. So, and my last one is, growth strategies, and throughout the province of Ontario, every community and every municipality has a vision of where they're going to be in 10 years and what the growth is going to be and the percentage of growth year after year to make sure that everything within the municipality can keep up with that growth. And my question to the planning department, which I don't know, and I don't know if anybody on council knows here, what is our expected growth in the Port Severn area over the next, I'm not sure what your planners use for a term to determine that, but I'll let you carry, you know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. And I'll ask the question to our director. Thank you.
Dr. Whitlam?
Thank you. Through the mayor to planning council. So the overall growth strategy for the different municipalities and their respective urban centers within the district, that's a study that's being undertaken by the district of Muskoka right now. Staff have seen some of the preliminary information. What I'll say at this point is that the overall growth projections are not significant. For example, the 2051 planning horizon, they may or may not necessitate any additional urban center land or an expansion of the urban center. If so, whether that's Port Severn or MacDiar, it would likely be fairly minimal. So there is not a substantial amount of additional growth projected that would necessitate significant upgrades to transportation or servicing infrastructure. There seems to be lots of capacity in that regard.
Thank you, and that's the answer I was hoping for, so that we're not just here for this year and next year, we're here for a lifetime, and we have to prepare for a lifetime, and the decisions we make here really shape the future. So thank you for your comments.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to add to that, that if some of the growth that could happen in Port Severn happens, at a certain point, the water and sewer plants have to be reviewed. Their capacity will have to be reviewed. Any other comments or questions at this point? All right, I have a motion then. Oh, Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, really quickly, sorry, this whole provision is interesting to me in many respects, but I'm just to confirm within that provision are the, well, in terms of the provision, and one of them is that fish habitat is protected, bat habitat is protected. Construction impacts regarding those habitats are mitigated, and the validity of EIS in general should be the final design, not proceed until 2030 or later, yada yada yada. But so in essence, we are looking at, via this whole provision, protecting that fish habitat, correct? So that any waterfront design work that comes forward, if we approve this as is, has to be cognizant of that very specific wording within the whole provision, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. Hutchison and myself have from the outset shared council's concerns that we're not seeing a lot of details with respect to the proponent's EIS, which does speak to some restoration along the water's edge, but that it doesn't finally decide or determine or recommend what that may or may not be. And the agent has agreed to the new holding provision, which allows these discussions of detail to be shifted to the period of time when they come with a final design plan. So rather than doing a lot of spending now on a design concept, what the applicants basically said is, look, we can't just keep on re-engineering, redesigning, let's leave this. And what we've said and what they've agreed to is the additional stopgap that they don't have full zoning until our peer review consultants and I come to you and say, please, council, remove the hold. We're satisfied that this has been achieved.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. This will conclude the Planning Act public meeting for official plan amendment file O23-06 and Z23-16 with other than the motion that I'm about to read. All comments, questions, and concerns raised at the public meeting have been recorded and will be taken into consideration by staff prior to a recommendation being brought forward. And so therefore, I'm closing this portion of the public meeting at 10:26. And I'm going to read the appropriate motion. And that is moved by Councillor Predko, second by Councillor Bocek. Be it resolved that Council for the Township of Georgian Bay accepts all information presented at the public meeting on July 9th, 2024 regarding the Township Official Plan Amendment Application number O23-06 and the Township Zoning Bylaw Amendment number Z23-19 regarding a proposed development of the subject lands. And the Council refers all information to Township staff for further discussion and review with all participants and correspondents who participated in the meeting of July 9th, 2024. And the Township staff shall schedule the next meeting of Council to evaluate the applications at the earliest date after all outstanding comments from the District of Muskoka and the parking peer review are addressed by the agent and owner to the satisfaction of Township staff. All those in favor? Oh, yes, Councillor Jarvis?
I believe there is a provision in there that there will be no more public meetings. Is that correct? I saw that in, yes. I don't think it's within the motion, but I think what we're looking at right now is no more public meetings. And I'm wondering if that's appropriate. Or if we should be considering that further.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the difference between a public meeting, a statutory public meeting, and meeting in public is that a statutory meeting requires advance notice, and our official plan places greater requirements for notice than does the Planning Act, which would mean the earliest possible Planning Council would likely be September, but might not even be at that point. Again, I think staff's concern is that we would rather have council given the opportunity to make a decision on this application than to have a request for an appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal be made, because we are well past the period of time for council to make their decision. So we're encouraging council that we keep this as a meeting in public, but not a public meeting. So there would still be an agenda that would be available in advance. People would have the opportunity by making requests to the Clerks Department to be delegates before council if they wish to continue to address the proposal. But we would not be sending notice. We certainly could reach out to the neighbor and to anyone who participated today directly by email, which again, the Planning Act and our policies don't yet allow for. But again, that's where we're hoping to take this. If the development application were to change dramatically, which again, I don't see any indication from the agent that that is something that is in the cards, there might be a need for a further public meeting. But again, I don't see that as a possibility at this point.
We just make sure we put the recommendation, and then those that have showed interest today be informed of upcoming events regarding this application.
I'm happy with that as a friendly amendment to the resolution, so long as it is clearly stating not something to the effect that is noticed by digital means as opposed to the Planning Act.
We do have one of the sentences in the existing motion reads that council refers all information to township staff for further discussion and review with all participants and correspondents who participated in the meeting of
clarification.
July 9th.
Thank you.
Council, do you want the motion read again, or can I call the vote? All those in favor, please. And that is carried. Thank you very much. All right. Next on our list is the second public meeting is for proposed zoning bylaw amendment Z24-06. The clerk will now provide an update on correspondence received.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, if I could. Could we have a bio break or between these, or can I be excused?
Normally I wait until 11 o'clock, but if you want your bio break now. I don't know if that qualifies as a point of order, but because I don't believe, I'm not sure it's in our, I don't think it's in our procedural bylaw that bio breaks must be given every 90 minutes, but under the circumstances, let's have a 10-minute recess.
Correspondence relating to the zoning bylaw amendment file Z24-06 was received as follows. One letter correspondence was received from the District of Muskoka stating no objection in principle to this application as currently proposed. One letter correspondence was received from Jurati Sitsiunas in support of the application conditional upon being able to build another cottage on Cow Island. One letter of correspondence was received by Thomas W. Bain, not opposed to the application, but is concerned about septic systems. And one letter of correspondence was received from Kaylee Nicholson, Chief Building Official, stating concerns with septic system and minor variance may be required.
All right, thank you very, oh, excuse me. Thank you very much. And if we can now go to Ms. Montfort, I believe this is your report. Thank you.
Through the mayor. Just 1 second here. Technology. The subject island is located in South Bay within the Honey Harbor coastal waterfront community, having an area of over 3,000 square meters above the high water mark and a frontage of approximately 135 meters. The lands are characterized by granite rock, and the areas above the high water mark contain mature trees. The portion of the island below the high water mark is sand covered and contains a mix of tall grasses. A detached dwelling and accessory buildings and structures occupy the island. The lands are designated waterfront within the district and township official plans, identified as having moderate to high archaeological potential and abut type 2 fish habitat. The property has a site-specific zone, being shoreline residential island type 2 exception 51, and is serviced by a septic system. In April of this year, the property owners pursued the pre-application consultation process. At this time, an addition onto the sleeping cabin and associated walkway were proposed. Staff conducted a detailed review of the proposal for compliance with the zoning bylaw, finding that the only permitted uses are legally existing buildings and structures, and that they are not permitted to expand. Records indicate that a permit was not obtained for the sleeping cabin or other accessory buildings or structures on the island, with the exception of the attached deck and dock located in front of the dwelling. Documentation to support that these buildings were constructed legally could not be provided by the property owners. The purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the island from a shoreline residential island type 2 exception 51 zone to a shoreline residential island type 2 exception zone that reflects the development on the island. The effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is the permission to construct an addition onto the detached dwelling, an addition onto the sleeping cabin, as well as legalize the existing sleeping cabin shed, a second dock, gazebo, and 2 freestanding decks. To be clear, the only new or proposed development on the island is an addition onto the rear of the dwelling and an addition onto the sleeping cabin. The public meeting is only for the purpose of conveying information and gathering comments. Staff are recommending that council direct staff to prepare a recommendation report and bylaw for council's consideration at a subsequent meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Is the applicant or agent for the applicant present?
Okay, there I am. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. I am the agent, Jessica Gunby, for this application, and we didn't prepare a presentation, but I did want to add a couple of things to staff's presentation. There was an additional letter of no concern from Peter Seidel from South Bay Cottages that was sent in May and also this morning. Karen, you were on mute before, so I'm not sure if you referred to that, so sorry if you did. And there was also a septic evaluation report submitted, and Victoria from Flow Drawings is here to speak to that if council has seen it, but if you have not, we can resend it, and it does state that based on her evaluation, the system can support what's existing and what is proposed. But again, Victoria is here to speak to that. I wanted to also add that the bunkie has been there since before 2011 per the real estate listing that we found online, and the current owners bought the property in 2021. And also the applicants are in the audience to answer any additional questions you may have, but staff has provided a detailed report and we don't have anything else to add, and we don't have any comments of this morning's, sorry, the comments I received this morning, we don't have any comments on those.
Thank you very much. You are the applicants. Do you wish to make any additional comments at this time? Okay, thank you. And I'm not seeing any other members of the public that want to speak to this that we're aware of. All right, if that, I'm going to turn it over to council for their comments with regards to this application. And we're going to start with Councillor Bocek, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So if I'm understanding this correctly, there was construction done on Cow Island. It was sold, and the new owners are trying to bring the island into compliance and then do some additional work. Is that my understanding through our planning department?
Through the chair, I do not believe this is Cow Island. I believe Cow Island is north of the subject lands.
I'm sorry. Then I'll correct myself. So the property was purchased in 2001, and the new owners are wanting to bring the property into compliance so that they can do additional expansion to the main unit.
Through the chair, I believe, or sorry, through the mayor, I believe the property was purchased in 2021 by the applicant. And yes, they are now trying to bring the property into compliance. This was brought to their attention through the pre-application consultation process. And now they would like to make a small addition to the dwelling and sleeping cabin.
Thank you. I have no problems with this application at all. I think it's the right thing to be done, and I commend the folks for doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Shania, I wondered if we could go back to your report, and there was a picture from the air, and then also a second picture I wanted to reference so I could understand what's going on here. So if we could start with, there was an aerial photo of 2023.
Through the mayor, I'm just going to put that up on my screen. Just one moment.
Yes, thank you. So I have some questions around elevations and areas that I see here. It strikes me that, and it's just an observation, but I think it's worthy of being aware of it, that this might even be two shoals ganged together. If you look at the area that's sort of halfway along the top, there's a big, huge flat area. I noticed in the next set of photographs there was actually a stone break wall that had been manufactured with filter cloth and so forth. So that's in your next photograph. But did you give any consideration to the fact that it looks like somebody's manufactured one big island out of two shoals? Because that's what I'm seeing here, especially this. You see this whole area, there's, you know, along the left-hand side, there's a stone break wall that's been manufactured, and there's filter cloth and infill. And then there's infill further over to the left, so to speak, right at the water's edge. It looks to me like where those trees are growing off in the distance is one shoal and one area, and then the other part of the new island that's been created. Have you given any thought to the creation of this property?
Through the mayor, The Ontario Land Surveyor showed as, I'm sorry, I don't have a full image of the entire survey, but the Ontario Land Surveyor did show both shoals, for lack of a better term in trying to explain this, as being part of the subject lands. The difference between the two is they're separated by areas that are below the high water mark and essentially unable to be used by habitable dwellings or buildings. And that's the area you're seeing with the sand and the rock there. That separates the, I believe that's located along the high water mark.
Sorry, so the land in between these two shoals that were, I see something that's been ganged together, manufactured, in other words. And if that's the case, I just think our planning department needs to be aware of that this is two pieces of land essentially. You can sort of, I picked up on it right away when I saw the aerial view, and then I look at some of these photographs and I see rock outcroppings that are just to the left of this cottage, for example, in the oval picture, and some trees on that land there that probably have been there a long time, and then filled in between one end of the property and the other. So I'm just asking that question. And then the other thing that sort of I want to understand is you show the high water mark, but what about, what are the elevations so that there's sort of a high water mark, but what's the elevation where these buildings are? Is it another half a meter, quarter meter? Because it looks very, very flat, and I'm not seeing a lot of protection, because there's a good chance that the next high water mark will be even higher than the current one. And there's a big possibility of that. So I'd like to understand that. Thank you.
If I may, through the mayor, the zoning bylaw does have regulations for minimum opening elevations for buildings and structures. We can look at the detailed drawings of the sleeping cabin, should we get to that point, and the dwelling to ensure that they comply with those minimum opening elevations.
If I may, I'm asking the planning department to give a consideration to the fact that, and I really didn't hear this in the report other than acknowledgement about two areas, that we do have potentially an issue here of a manufactured island. Thank you.
Just as a piece of additional information, when I'm looking at the survey, it looks like they've indicated 178.75 as the elevation of the main cottage.
Yeah, which is the high water mark.
Well, it's a meter above the high water mark, in effect.
Well,
yeah, okay, but I'm just saying that I'm just confirming the elevation.
I'm not just trying to say that it's a high risk in a high water year of a lot of this being flooded out.
Councillor Predko, please.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just a question, and I'm going to direct this to our CBO, Ms. Nicholson, with regards to her correspondence and the septic system. I can understand the setbacks for this property with for the septic is less than our bylaws. And is that the source of your suggestion that there could be a minor variance required after this is approved?
So
and do you have other concerns other than that? Thank you.
So through the mayor, we don't do a full review when we're looking at this. We're just asked for comments, and we don't have all the information we would at building permit stage. What my comments generally are for to make the applicants aware, and obviously planning council as well, if we believe there could be a possibility of an issue, and it very well may be fine. We did not review Victoria's proposal. That was more for planning purposes. So what will happen is if it does get passed and it does make it to the building permit stage, that is when we will do a full review. And if at that time we find that it does not meet the requirements of the Ontario Building Code, then they will have to make a proposal. And obviously it wouldn't meet the 30-meter setback, and therefore they would have to apply for another variance. If at all, it has to meet building code first.
Thank you very much. That's all.
Councillor Jarvis, please.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat myself, but yeah, I do have a high watermark issue. And just for information to the planning department, we have the high watermark there for a reason. It's indicated in the survey, which is all well and good. But during the last period of high water, we had a storm surge that was not fetch, that was not wave action, that was just a storm surge. It was an additional, I would say, somewhere around 8 inches in old imperial terms, which would. Thank you very much. The issue here is that if I'm looking at that picture, just as Councillor Cooper saw, you've got a fair bit of land that is sort of at the high water mark, and that's where I am very, very concerned. The opening elevation for the cabin is something I definitely think we should be reviewing, and I appreciate that that consideration from the planning department. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton, please.
My turn. Kaylee, if I may. Our septic system requirement says that the septic system has to be a meter above the high water mark, right? I'm looking at the layout of the land here. I see the approximate septic system location, not seeing any elevations there, but I'm looking at the frame bunkie, and it says the sill is at 178.19, which, so the bunkie is not a meter above the high water mark. I'm wondering if, first of all, the building department is responsible for the septic, and I get all that. But we have an example in our township of 2 Island 20, which to me is not that different from this, where I think it had a dash 51 on it. There was additional construction, but the end state was, they said at that time, whoever they are, that the only option was a holding tank. And given this scenario, I too am concerned about septic. I'm wondering if, first of all, as far as what happened on the island, they bought it. They assumed, I'm sure, that things were there. Real estate agents don't do, as you already told us, don't do the proper due diligence. So we have a situation where you bought something, you thought it was reasonable. Maybe there was all kinds of infilling. Maybe they did all kinds of things. I don't really care at this point in time. It's how do we help this resident move forward with something safe for the environment? And so I think a large portion of that is you and the building code, and I would actually personally feel that a holding tank would be a better solution given what I'm seeing here, but that's your call.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Hazelton. So number one, they have an existing septic there that's approved. So if they go ahead with their proposal and it meets the requirements, nothing's going to be done. Secondly, if they choose not to go ahead, they don't. But the whole point is the way the zoning bylaw is applicable is fine, but holding tanks are something that aren't very much allowed and are only allowed in certain situations because the province doesn't like them. They don't like the hauling of sewage. They don't like trying to find somewhere for it to go. So there are other options, because if the issue obviously is the height above the high water mark and the 30-meter setback, that they would have to come back for a variance for, and obviously if it got approved, it did, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, then the development wouldn't go forward if it was needed. But they could always raise that area. I haven't been on the island, so I'm not sure exactly what that would entail. Obviously, you would have to raise the whole system. You couldn't just raise the septic, but you could bring that elevation of that septic up to the requirement, depending on what it is. So unfortunately, I don't know exactly what that elevation is.
But you never get the setbacks given the
right.
The
so
location.
so they always have to meet Ontario Building Code. There's no variance from Ontario Building Code. So that's number one thing to remember. On top of that is the zoning bylaw. And if they're trying to enlarge something, they don't meet the setbacks, they do have to apply for a minor variance, which would put them back before everybody here. And then you as planning council would make, or committee of adjustment, I should say, would make the decision moving forward.
Okay, so one final question then. They bought what they bought. There is apparently development that hasn't been previously approved, apparently. Does that mean that that has to be somehow approved? And if consideration of that triggers a septic review, does that happen, or are we or do we ignore what happened in the past?
If they have done development without a permit that affects the septic, that septic has to meet the requirements. So if not, they would have to remove the development. So say that existing septic was on there, the existing cottage was there, they built without a permit, they needed to upgrade the septic because of whatever development they did, because obviously, like anything else, they'd have to go through a whole process for building without a permit. And part of that review, again, is they'd have to make application. If that septic was not size big enough and they could not increase the size to meet building code or the zoning bylaw, then that development would have to go. If it was done with no permit.
Right. But we've heard from Jessica that a study has been done and the size is okay. Do you accept that, or?
We'll do our own. So that I have not reviewed Victoria's proposal, but they do that for, I think, planning purposes, but we do not do a full review until we have an application in front of us because we don't have all the information to do the proper review. So our notes are more just, this is a warning, this could be a possible problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to make this very brief. The way that I see this is that we have new owners, relatively new owners who have adopted and purchased a property. Far as I can see from aerial photos in 2008, the structures were present. They are still present. I'm assuming the septic system was likely the same at that time. First and foremost, like Councillor Bocek, I want to commend the owners for bringing this back to council and seeking a way to make this legal and conforming. I don't want to penalize them for working within our system. I'd like to work with them further and try to make their lives, as easy as possible and as enjoyable as possible within the property that they have. I do respect the fact that there is concerns with regards to septic systems and the potential impacts that it may have on the environment. And no fault of the current owners. I don't want this to be a major stumbling block, but at the same time, I also want to be cognizant of and ensure that we are very much focused on the environment and seek to protect it as much as possible. So with that said, the request of staff today is to essentially redirect them and give them our consent to proceed to prepare a recommendation report and bylaw for council's consideration. I don't wish to deliberate this in council today. Rather, I just want to go ahead and say, staff, you have my consent. So I'll vote in favor for your recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. You've heard everyone's concerns. From my personal perspective, the biggest hurdle that you have to clear, I believe, is the septic system. Is it up to snuff? Because if it isn't up to snuff, then you have additional challenge. Can I put it that way? And so I got my fingers crossed for you on that one. But yeah, no, the motion in front of, I see Ms. Flo Drawings. Did you want to make an additional comment? I will allow that.
Yeah, I just thought I would kind of chime in here. Kaylee was correct. We do these septic valuation reports in preparation for the planning approvals. It's become a practice of ours when we go for minor variances. As we work through the pre-consultations, knowing that it was a waterfront property, we knew we had to get the surveys in place and we had to kind of work through the process. The holding or the -51 exception was missed originally, and this is the property owner trying to address it. Our evaluation report was done based off of a 2008 permit. We use our own site inspection as well as, but we're not going into the ground, but just as well as the permit documents. We did something that I think is kind of worthwhile noting is that the inspections were actually, although it's a 2008 permit, the inspections were done in 2015 and 2016. And the size of the system does support both proposals, as well as the existing structures on the property. One other thing to note too is that the bed is quite a bit raised from the floor elevation of both structures. That's just kind of what I was on site, so I wanted to kind of add those pieces in case somebody else might not have been. Thank you.
Thank you for the additional information. I have moved by, oh, excuse me. I have moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that Council directs staff to prepare a recommendation report and bylaw for Council's consideration at a subsequent meeting. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This one. Okay, we have one more Planning Act public meetings. So the third public meeting is for a proposed official plan amendment O24-02 and zoning bylaw amendment Z24-02. The clerk will now provide an update on correspondence received.
Correspondence relating to official plan amendment file O24-02 and zoning bylaw amendment file Z24-02 was received as follows. One letter of correspondence was received from the District of Muskoka stating no objection in principle to this application as currently proposed. One letter of correspondence was received from Kaylee Nicholson, Chief Building Official, stating ongoing official building code issues will need to upgrade septic system if approved, and official building code and zoning bylaw need to be met.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kratky, you are the planner, I believe, on this particular application. Over to you.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I will share my screen. Applications O2402 and Z2402 have subject lands municipally known as 144 6 Mile Channel Road. The agent is Jamie Robinson and Patrick Towns of MHBC. Given Jamie is before the OLT, I assume that Patrick will be online representing the agent's interests or the applicant's interests. This application has a very long history that is discussed in detail in the background part of my report to Council. At a very high level, in 2020, the owner entered an agreement with the township for the use of the existing dwelling during the construction of a new dwelling on the subject lands. In 2023, the owner made pre-application consultation requests for 2 dwellings on the subject lands. After discussions with myself and with our deputy CBO, the owner proposed conversion of the existing dwelling to a sleeping cabin. In 2024, the agent applied for amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw to allow for the conversion of the existing dwelling to a sleeping cabin. The subject lands are located approximately here in the township, and on a more detailed view off of 6 Mile Channel Road and off of 6 Mile Channel in the red on these lands. The agent submitted, along with the application of planning justification report that included a survey plan. The agent added the red in the upper right-hand corner of that to address staff comments, both from the building department and from myself, with respect to more need for detailed information about the septic system being proposed. I've added the red to very clearly identify that this is the proposed sleeping cabin. So it is an existing dwelling that is being proposed for conversion to a sleeping cabin. In 2013, the existing dwelling is shown here, and you'll notice that the property is largely natural in its state. In 2018, which again predates the current owners, you'll see the existing dwelling here, the existing dock and a very significant change to the use of the property in the northeast corner approximately of the subject lands. The most recent Google satellite imagery shows the new dwelling, the existing dwelling, which is being proposed to be converted for to a sleeping cabin. The purpose of application 02402 is to add subsection F.3.3.6.2.x to the official plan permitting a sleeping cabin in the minimum required front yard. The effect of the application allows a sleeping cabin as a new use in an existing building in use as a detached dwelling. The existing building has a location in the front yard, a setback approximately 1.89 meters from the high water mark, a height of approximately 5.5 meters, a floor area of approximately 47.3 square meters, a kitchen that must be removed during conversion of the use, and a deck area of approximately 3.8 square meters. The purpose and effect of application Z2402 is to further amend the Georgian Bay Township zoning bylaw number 2014 and 75 as amended so that map number 132 in Schedule A rezones the subject lands from shoreline residential type 1 zone to a shoreline residential site-specific exception zone, and table 6.3 SR1 exceptions in subsection 6.5 include a new row A, column 1 states SR1 XX zone per bylaw 2024 XXX. B, column 5 states notwithstanding subsections 4.1.2, 4.1.7, 4.1.12, 4.1.14F, 4.1.14H, 4.14C, 4.41, and 6.3 regarding the front yard row in column 2 of table 6.2, that a sleeping cabin is permitted in an existing building having a minimum setback from the high water mark of 1.89 meters, a maximum height of 5.5 meters, gross floor area of 47.3 square meters, and an attached deck having an area of 3.8 square meters. And column 6 sets out an additional provision stating any expansion of the sleeping cabin is prohibited. The effect of the application allows a new sleeping cabin use in an existing building in use as a detached dwelling after the kitchen is removed while prohibiting any future expansion. At the time of the preparation of my report, there were no public comments. The clerk has read a couple of comments that have been received. Actually, the District of Muskoka comments had been received, and as had the CBOs. But today and yesterday, there has been a member of the public that has been indicating some interest, but it is not quite clear to me what their public comments and questions may be. I do expect that they are going to be participating in the meeting. Lastly, this public meeting is about information. Information about the applications, information from council, from public, where we as planners get an opportunity to hear your comments. It allows for a dialogue between all the parties. And if the applications are significantly revised, may require a further public meeting. But otherwise, again, staff would recommend that council not hold a further statutory public meeting, but rather simply receive the staff report with analysis and recommendations at the next meeting, not necessarily the next meeting in August, but the next meeting that it is appropriate to bring it back to council. And with that, the recommended resolution accepts the information, refers the information to staff, and again states that we will not ask you to consider an analysis and recommendation. until the application's comments have been addressed.
Thank you. Is the applicant or their agent present?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, staff. I am Patrick Towns, here on behalf of the applicant today and the owner. They apologize. They are attending to business matters today and couldn't attend, but nonetheless, I'm here. I will be brief, and I appreciate the general overview by staff that covers the background information. So perhaps what I will focus on is our process and the planning land use justification matters, just for your consideration today, understanding there's no recommendation before you, but just want to provide you the information. MHBC were retained by the owners in late March, so we were not involved in the previous pre-consultation process. And what we did, similar or all our files we take on, we do a due diligence. So we attended the site and we wanted to make sure we could support the applications. And through that due diligence, we've submitted the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications to legalize the conversion of that existing dwelling into a sleeping cabin. And what we've primarily looked at in a key consideration, just sharing my screen with a view from the dock, key consideration is the vegetation in the front yard and along the shoreline. So what we're recommending and to contribute to the public interest in terms of views from the shoreline and whatnot is plantings to be completed. So plantings both in the front yard, plantings to screen the wall that's been constructed, and also plantings in front of that existing structure along the shoreline. One of the required amendments is height to that proposed sleeping cabin. It exceeds the maximum height by 1 meter, with some plantings at the base of that building. Between the shoreline, we feel like that height can be mitigated against. And another important consideration is the zoning on this property. It does permit buildings either close to the shoreline or in water boathouses. So those permissions currently do exist on the property, and we evaluated that in terms of is a building appropriate at this location, and a building or structure is. We're just dealing with how that building's used in this case. The other key consideration is alternative locations. So the owners do have permissions to construct a sleeping cabin based on the current zoning behind the existing dwelling. If this building were to be removed, a sleeping cabin was constructed behind the existing cottage, what the township may lose in that case is the ability to require these plantings and renaturalize the shoreline. So that's just a consideration as you review the application and we move forward to eventual recommendations on this report. But we are aware also of the ongoing discussions with the building department with the septic system. There seems to be an agreement based on the number of bedrooms. It's just questions about the number of fixtures, and we're willing to sort that out before the next meeting. But again, we consider the application through the due diligence process. We submitted the applications, and we feel that plantings or revegetation of the shoreline and in front of that existing building is an important factor for consideration. So with that concludes my presentation. Welcome any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public, perhaps online, who wish to comment? Ms. Vita, I see your hand up. If you could please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to take this opportunity to advise council of some of our concerns as neighbors to the subject property. The picture that was put up by the consultant was a very good example of what you can see from the channel. So our first concern is that we don't think it is right that the applicant made a commitment when they were issued a building permit to demolish the old cottage as a condition of the new build. And now they're closing off their permit for the new cottage and they have changed their mind and want to keep the old cottage too. So we believe that this was an intentional misuse of the process. I noticed that the location of the existing septic that has served the existing dwelling on the waterfront has not been noted on the site plan. And my question is, will the township be requesting that the old septic system be decommissioned as a condition of this approval? Also, the planning justification report submitted by the applicant indicates that there are no other areas on the site to place the sleeping cabin so that it will comply with the OPA and ZBA without removing additional trees. So when I look at the aerial photo that's provided in the planning justification report and the aerial that was provided to you a few moments ago by Mr. Kratky, it shows large areas of the site that are already cleared outside of the building envelope, where the new cottage has been constructed, where the sleeping cabin could be located without further removal of trees, and which would also comply with the town's official plan and zoning bylaw. The planning justification also offers a planting plan for the shore side of the sleeping cabin as part of the requested approval. This area does not look like it can sustain any sort of meaningful plantings. This area is within 2 meters of the high water mark. Should the council approve the applications, we would like to note that the issue lies with the destruction that has taken place as a result of the construction of the new cottage. A planting plan to screen and restore the natural environment along the waterfront would better serve the public interest and provide better environmental mitigation than a few plantings in front of the existing old cottage. The blasting and removal of all of the waterfront vegetation has created an eyesore. We would request the township require a more meaningful planting and restoration plan that addresses the entire waterfront and not just the area in front of the sleeping cabin as offered by the applicant. Section J 4.2b of the official plan includes an objective to ensure the protection of the exceptional visual aesthetics of lakes, rivers, and shoreline areas, and to preserve the overall natural appearance of the waterfront area. The visual aesthetics of lakes, rivers, and shoreline areas will be protected, and the overall natural appearance of the waterfront area will be protected as the building exists. And another objective of the official plan is preserving the quality of the natural and cultural heritage of Muskoka within the waterfront area. Tree cover, vegetation, and other natural features are encouraged to be retained to uphold the visual and environmental integrity of the waterfront. I would submit that the recent development is not consistent with the policies of the township's official plan. I would submit that a comprehensive planting plan for the entire waterfront should be required, which would bring the property back into better conformity with the official plan objectives. There are some historical compliance issues with this property. We do have some concerns related to future compliance with township approvals should these applications be approved. To allow the township to maintain additional control over any required plantings, we would also request that the township secure this work through a site plan agreement that is registered on title with securities held by the township to ensure it is implemented and maintained. Those are my submissions. Thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vita. Are there any other members of the public that we're aware of that want to make any comment? All right, with that, then I'm going to turn it over to council, and we'll start with Councillor Pocek, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Jennifer, you gave us the opportunity to ask you questions, and I do have a couple of questions for you, if you wouldn't mind. First question being, are you a resident of 6 Mile Lake?
Yes, we occupy the cottage at 122 6 Mile Channel.
That's what I was going to ask, because normally we ask people presenting to give their name and address, and I was wondering your relationship geographically to the subject lands that are in front of us with this application. Are you in visual sight of this property?
Not in visual sight. Well, I guess when we're on our dock, yes, you can see the property for sure.
Okay, very much. So my concerns were very much the same concerns as Ms. Vita's, and I had written down here before she presented that was it part of the original proposal that this cabin be removed upon completion of construction? And if that was a condition that was given at the approval stage, then our decision was made at that point in time that this cabin was coming down in order to give the approval for what was built. And I see a change of mind, a pivot, a change in direction here, which is understandable. But when the previous permissions were given based on this building being removed, I think that has to be upheld. And thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, you had a hand up.
I'd be mirroring the comments made by Councillor Bocek and by Ms. Vita. I'm in full agreement. If an agreement was made early on that that building would be removed, then that's what we should be working with. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
I guess I could say ditto, but I do want to make a few comments just to fully understand what's gone on here. Starting with the fact that, as I understand it from previous years' applications for 6 Mile Lake, there isn't actually a high water mark at 6 Mile Lake. There's a high water mark in Georgia Bay. There are lakes like any of the other lakes pretty much are not controlled, but 6 Mile Lake is. So a controlled water body like that has a shoreline, so to speak, but it's not a high water mark. A high water mark implies that the water is going to go over time way up or way down, like we see on Georgian Bay. So the terminology, I just want to point out, according to previous councillors that were from the area said, and I happen to think it makes a lot of sense, that we need to use the right term, and the right term would be, you know, the water's edge as opposed to a high water mark. Do you have any comment about that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will share my screen just quickly. Again, this would normally be part of the evaluation report, but I think it helps to answer the question directly with the picture. So this is GeoHub, and these are the engineered hazardous lands mapping provided by, I believe it was Hatch for the District of Muskoka. And they are at a greater level of detail than is the base map. So the distinction between the difference between the shorelines is expected, given that the Hatch engineered line is very precise. In this case, because of the regulated water level, and because this is so far upstream from the lock at Port Severn, there is very little difference between the current water's edge, the high water mark, and this flood hazard line. And the flood hazard line, surprisingly, despite the fact that the existing dwelling that's being proposed for conversion, the flood hazard line is nowhere close to it. Well, let's put this into context. It's 1.89 meters from it. So basically where the current water's edge is the high water mark is the flood line. And that's probably the reason that dwelling has stood since 1964 without being washed away by the water of Trent-Severn waterway. So I think the hazardous lands matter is probably far less an important focus in this particular case than are the other matters that have already been discussed.
Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take it offline with you just to make sure that we're using the right terminology in the right place. That was really I was just trying to be helpful, but I'll be glad to have a further discussion with you. But with respect to this, I had made notes as Councillor Bocek had said. I thought right away, looks to me like this was not a sleeping cabin originally, but probably the main cottage, and it should have been torn down. That's sort of typically what happens. So, but it's still there. And it turns out that maybe there was a requirement that it be torn down, and it hasn't been. So, at least that's what I'm hearing. I guess potentially what we could consider that this could be, instead of a sleeping cabin, which should be properly located and set back, could be a dryland boathouse, as an example. And as long as it's not converted back to a sleeping cabin. So that might be a way of allowing the owner to keep the building, but use it for a purpose that typically you would have a building that close to the shoreline, a dryland boathouse. So I would just say that. As far as shoreline alteration and blasting, I heard about blasting and so on. I'm not sure where the allowances were given for all of that, but once again, it's concerning to me that we should work with the land, not blast our way around. I'd like to see much better setback for a sleeping cabin. In other words, 20 meters. That's what really any dwellings where it has human habitation is 20 meters back. So proper setback. And those are, I guess, all my points. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano, please.
Thank you, through your worship. I'm going to reserve my comments for this matter to return, or upon this matter returning back to council in future. I do want to advise that I do agree with the recommendation of staff today, and I'll be voting according to the recommendation. And just as an educational component, if I may, for fellow councillors here today, 6 Mile Lake Channel is not the same as 6 Mile Lake. They are quite a ways apart and not on the same water body. So I just want to let everyone know that the channel is not a part of the actual 6 Mile Lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Predko.
Thank you. I didn't want to give up my chance to speak. So I don't really have anything, really profound to add. My concerns on this, I think, be echoed by the same other councillors. The setback, the closeness to the water, and the prominence of the building on the shoreline. I think when the original approval was given and the cottage was to be removed, I think that probably would have made sense. I know this council has approved the retention of the original cottage in new builds after the fact in a similar application process like this is going through, but I think in those other instances, the original cottage was smaller. It was not on the shoreline in the same degree, and I think it was probably meeting the 20-meter setback. So if this application was similar to those conditions, I would be more favorable to it. But at this moment, the prominence and the shoreline setback are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm also aware of cases where council in the past has not given permission to an application similar to this. So there has been history both ways, with each time various unique. Oh, my face is still off. There's various unique aspects to it. I think I share the concerns that I've heard from many of you. But two comments. One, it really hits me in the one picture. That is one massive wall that is in front of that cottage. And quite frankly, I don't like the thought of, well, if we approve this, they'll plant some trees. I think they should be planting trees regardless. And if it's not in their requirements, I think still as responsible residents, trees should be planted in front of that wall to try to minimize it, because that is a dominant feature of the visual aspect at this point. I don't know how else to describe it. But no, I think you've heard everyone's concerns, and I am going to read the motion. Or do I have to say something else before I read the motion here? Okay. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council for the Township of Georgian Bay accepts all information presented at the public meeting on July 9th, 2024 regarding Township Official Plan Amendment Application Number O24-02 and Township Zoning Bylaw Amendment Number Z24-02 regarding proposed development of the subject lands, and that Council refers all information and comments to Township staff for further discussion with the agent and anyone who commented. And the Township staff shall not schedule the next meeting of Council to evaluate the applications until after comments are addressed. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this ends, sorry. Okay, this concludes the public meetings. And all comments, questions, concerns raised at the public meetings will have been recorded and will be taken into consideration by staff prior to a recommendation being brought forward. So our public meeting is now closing at 11:37. Okay. Now we have 4 planning application staff reports to consider. And then we have a staff report. And then we have new business. So we have a few more items to go. And our first staff report is in regards to deeming bylaw application D24-04 for 3346 Island 980 Georgian Bay. And that is over to our planner, Ms. Wanfall.
Through the mayor, the property currently has a frontage of 72 meters in an area of approximately 3,500 square meters of frontage on Georgian Bay. The property is municipally known as 3346 Island 980 Georgian Bay and is legally described as Lot 19 on Plan 1, Island 144 in the Township of Georgian Bay. The property was the benefiting lands of consent application B2403, which was conditionally approved on June 27th by the Committee of Adjustment. The purpose of the consent was to adjust the lot boundary between 2 properties so that the existing legal non-complying detached dwelling will be located on one of the properties, whereas it is currently located on both. One of the conditions of consent is a deeming bylaw, deeming Lot 19 on Plan 1 not to be on a plan of subdivision. Planning Council can either pass or not pass the deeming bylaw. If the deeming bylaw is not passed, the applicant will be unable to fulfill the condition of consent and the lands are unable to merge. The consent would then lapse and no certificate of official would be issued by the Secretary Treasurer. And planning staff are recommending that Council enact the bylaw so that the condition can be fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any comments? Seeing none? Oh, sorry. I go this way and then, okay. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Through the mayor, we are just dealing with one condition of the consent at this time, which is the deeming bylaw.
Sorry, Mike. Yeah, I know that we discussed it significantly, so it's in planning department's mind anyway. Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
I'll be very brief. Other than I just need to say that I happen to be very familiar with this bay. In 2013, it was a mud flat, and this is a problem. Giving building approvals or anything like that on this would be very problematic, and looks like we're going down that road, and I'm disappointed to see that because what are we going to, if it comes down to it, we give all the approvals, the owner's going to come forward and say, I want to dredge this FH1 EP area. It's not right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Pregko. Be it resolved that Council enact bylaw 2024-068 to deem Lot 19, Registered Plan 1, to not be within a registered plan of subdivision, known municipally as 3346 Island 980 Georgian Bay. and that the clerk be directed to provide a certified copy of the deeming bylaw to the clerk of the District of Muskoka per section 5026 of the Planning Act. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 in favor, 2 against, 1 absent. That is carried. All right, Mr. Hradke. 6 Mile Lake dwelling unit size zoning bylaw. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and with your permission, I will share my screen. So at your last meeting, Philip and I appeared before you to discuss a project plan to look at official plan amendment number 22 and how additional amendments to the zoning bylaw might be undertaken after a lengthy and involved public process for 6 Mile Lake. At that time, I promised you an update this month. I, at that time, planned that this update would be more substantial and would include proposed information for a public open house. However, unfortunately, we are well behind in some key areas of the project already. We're in week 7 now. This is the project plan you may recall from the first report a month ago that's on the screen now. And we've run into 2 technical issues, one of which has been resolved, but a more substantial issue, which I'm here to kind of brief you on today without any optional solutions at this point, but please understand that we are looking very keenly at what we may do to keep moving forward. Section 3412 of the Planning Act requires that before passing a bylaw under this section, the council shall ensure that sufficient information is made available to enable the public to understand generally the zoning proposal that is being considered by council. Unfortunately, and not at our council's desire, and certainly my understanding is it was actually against council's wishes, that the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation required the municipality to enter an agreement last year that precludes us from making public, even in an aggregated way, any of the data that we produce, send to them, and they store. And so while we do have one of the 2 technical issues resolved, and we've already had a very, I would say, positive early work by Philippe to begin the statistical analysis, we've run smack into this legal agreement versus our requirement under the Planning Act. And as such, I'm here to let you know that this is a challenge for the project at this point, and that I do not know whether I will be back next month with new information yet. We certainly will work as hard as we can to bring it back to you. There's been no spending during this time period. There was some staff time used. And I'm simply asking council to accept this as information. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bochek.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really have a problem with the request here, but you mentioned that there was a legal agreement in place which has become a stumbling block or has become a barrier. And I know that your intent with this report was to be general and not be specific, but I'm wondering if you could enlighten the Planning Council on what legal agreement that seems to be the big hurdle to overcome.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on page 2 of my report, the 3rd paragraph discusses as much as I can in public the data sharing and services agreement between MPAC and the township dated December 13th, 2023.
Thank you for that, and I did read that in the report. It doesn't really offer much to the planning council, but I will accept your answer for what it is, and perhaps maybe offline sometime we'll have that discussion when the appropriate time comes around.
Through the mayor, if I may, further to Councillor Bocek, this isn't just while that agreement pertains specifically, it's between MPAC and the township of Georgian Bay. It's a cookie cutter agreement. The district is subject to the same sort of agreement as are all the other municipalities as well. So it's not a one-off.
And was this not the agreement that we signed under protest? Yeah. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, just really quickly ask Jeff, I presume both the associations are aware of this stumbling block that we've encountered, and I mean, they don't have much choice, obviously, like us, but they're aware of it too, correct?
Unfortunately, no. So this bombshell was dropped the day of 2 days before my vacation. So no, I have not actually yet directly communicated with the community associations. They certainly have access to this report, so I'm assuming that they likely know. I think at this point, we would like an opportunity internally to have more fulsome discussion and thought as to what our option or options might be before we engage with them, because there right now are two options that are clear. One is we proceed regardless and find out whether the wrath of God descends upon us. Another option is that we throw in the towel and just leave this to the OP review and zoning bylaw review updates. There may be other options. It's just none of them are clearly evident today
at this time. Okay, I see where we're going on this, and I think the level of transparency is going to be still very high in order for these guys to understand what's going on. And I see where you want to have your ducks in a row before doing so. That's fine. Okay, thanks.
I think it's the first time I've heard of the MPAC referred to as God. That's a scary religion.
I apologize for my outburst.
Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, and through your worship, I first and foremost want to say it's great to see a sense of humor in you, Jeff. I think this is the first time we've seen and witnessed it, so it's great to see it, and I welcome more of it. Secondly, in case the two associations are not aware, I'll of course bring it to their attention. I'll communicate that to them immediately, and I also want to say thank you for updating us. It's unfortunate that these licensing issues arise, and some of these technical hurdles can impact deliverable dates, but I do want to say that I do appreciate you bringing us up to speed on this and letting us know. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I moved by Councillor Bocek, second by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that council receive report regarding 6 Mile Lake dwelling ZBA 2024-25 project plan for information. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right. Zoning bylaw amendment application Z2404 for 4 Island 1210 Georgian Bay. Ms. Wanford.
Through the mayor, the subject property is vacant, forming part of Gendron Island, and was created by way of consent in 2014. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to remove the hold to facilitate future development in compliance with the zoning bylaw. The condition for removing the hold is the completion of a survey to confirm the lot area above the specified contour and to confirm the location of the high water mark. The lands have an area of 1.2 hectares above the high water mark as confirmed by the Ontario Land Surveyor. The lands are designated waterfront within the district and township official plans and are located within the Honey Harbor coastal waterfront community. They are zoned shoreline residential island type 2, and a survey was prepared by an Ontario Land Surveyor containing the required information. And Council has the ability to pass a bylaw pursuant to Section 36 of the Planning Act to remove the holding symbol, which planning staff are recommending. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions on this particular application? Or I should say, or report. Seeing none, I have moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved, the Council enacts bylaw 2024-069, being a zoning bylaw amendment, Z24-04, to remove a holding H2 symbol on lands legally described as Part 2 on Plan 35R-24680, Island 177, formerly Baxter, now in the Township of Georgian Bay, District Municipality of Muskoka, known municipally as 4 Island 1210. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Our final application under this section is for zoning bylaw amendment application Z24-01 for 184 Tower Road. Mr. Donaldson.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Subject property has an approximate area of 3.43 acres with a frontage of 50.73 meters onto Tower Road. The lands are characterized with a mix of sand and rock ground cover and natural vegetation consisting of low-lying plants and mature trees. The subject property is currently being used for the purpose of outdoor storage, a permitted use within the M5 zone. The applicant is proposing the construction of an indoor storage building, which is again a permitted use within the M5 zone. The subject property has an H1 hold due to being located within 500 meters of a waste disposal zone. Specifically, the subject property is approximately 430 meters from the waste disposal zone. In order to consider development of the property, the owners are requesting that the H1 hold be removed. The requirement for the removal of the holding provision is the completion of studies required by the township and district be completed in accordance with section I.2.4 of the Township Official Plan and I.3.4 of the District Official Plan. The owners have submitted a D4 land use compatibility assessment completed by Cambrium Inc. in accordance with these requirements. The D4 assessment submitted drew to the following conclusion. Any risks from the Tower Road transfer station on the site are expected to be insignificant. Groundwater resources on site are not interpreted to be influenced by landfill leachate. The landfill is not interpreted to adversely influence the site in any other way. Therefore, staff believe the sole condition for the removal of hold has been met. As the sole condition for the removal of hold has been met and the proposed development is in conformity with all applicable policy documents, staff are recommending approval of the zoning bylaw amendment as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? Councilor Jarvis.
Thank you, Andrew. I really don't have any objections. I'm just really curious. The description of the lands, to me, are in conflict with what I see that land being. That's all granite there. I don't see sand and gravel in that area. If you look at the aerial shot as part of the application, I think we're looking at rock barren there. We're not looking at sand and gravel, and I'm just wondering if that might have some impact on any future applications or any work that might be done if we have it misrepresented in that regard. I haven't been out there, so I could be wrong, but that's how I see it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I refer to it as sand and rock. By the sand, I refer to the overburden of the rock, and by rock, I refer to the granite rock. I'll go into more detail in future circumstances, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Predko. Be it resolved, the Council adopts bylaw 2024-070, being a zoning bylaw amendment, Z24-07, to remove a holding H1 symbol on lands legally described as Concession 5, Part Lot 10, Registered Plan 35R-18953, Part 1, Township of Georgian Bay, District Municipality of Muskoka, known municipally as 184 Tower Road. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Staff reports. Fee waiver request, consent application B2405. Mr. Kratky, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I'll share my screen. This is a subject lands that have already been before council and before the Committee of Adjustment. It's 70 Points of View Road. The agent is SVN Architects and Planners, Daniel Whitley and Michael Matties. The owner is Heatherland Justman. In this case, my report to you is again regarding a fee waiver for consent application B2405. The subject lands are located just off the 400 on Little Go Home Bay. They include the main lot 33, which is the original lot, the Shore Road Allowance, and the west property. Unfortunately, in 2011, township staff issued a Form 1 instead of a Form 4, creating the west property. Upon its registration as instrument MT101896, it means that the deeming bylaw that council passed in 2024 cannot be implemented at the land registry office until that instrument MT101896 is canceled. The only way to cancel that instrument is for the consent to be granted for the cancellation. And so an application has been made by the agent on behalf of the owner to cancel that consent, but the agent has requested that council waive the fee for that cancellation consent. I recommend that the council do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Fredko, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Just to clarify the value of the the waived fees in the financial considerations part of your report, it just says it's the cost of postage, but I don't believe that's not the cost of the fee. Could you just confirm, please?
So that's the out-of-pocket expenses that the township would accept. Staff time is not included, but clearly this is a rather straightforward matter where the other application fees have, I think, effectively compensated the municipality for staff's time and efforts. This is an unfortunate incident where previously the municipality used the wrong form to create the lot addition as it was supposed to be of the west property to the lot. And previously we thought the only reason that merger had not taken place was because of the subdivision plan, which is a valid barrier to that merger, which is why council was asked to do the deeming bylaw. In this case, though, a Form 1 instead of a Form 4 was used, and the Form 1 is not for a lot addition. It is for the creation of a new lot, and therefore it stands in the way now of the deeming bylaw, which the application fee was paid for. And so, again, I'm of the opinion that this is an appropriate fee waiver.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
I'm reminded of several MASH episodes where paperwork was wrongly filed, and the consequences of that. So this is basically township made an error and we're correcting it. Thank you.
And I apologize because I must have totally missed it, but what is the fee, the amount that we're actually waiving?
We have no special fee for a cancellation, so normally they would be paying the entire $1,500 consent fee.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to understand that. Any other questions or comments? Moved by Councillor Hazelton, second by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council for the Township of Georgian Bay waives the fee regarding a consent for a certificate of cancellation requested by application number B24-05 for 70 Points of View Road, Jessamine. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Can I make a request that we address in the new business in item B before A, please?
Yes. So let's go to new business item B, which, oh, no.
If I may, staff are requesting 10A is withdrawn as this matter was resolved last week. Matter was resolved last week.
And I understand what staff's position is, but I would like to continue with a council discussion on this.
All right, so 10B, municipal road on private land policy. Councillor Hazelton, please.
So I wanted to highlight a tiny bit of learning that I did, that I got, research that I did when I went to our website and discovered that we have a policy that deals with the municipal roads that cross private property. And when I dug into it, and hopefully you too have followed the link that I provided in this report, we find some very interesting statements about our policy that was defined for municipal roads that cross private land. And the reason why I'm bringing this forward is because we've had two recent ones and others recently as well. And there's an outstanding one as well that we are wrestling with. But what's interesting to me is that the way the policy is written, it kind of implies that, you know, the township doesn't need to own the land under the roads of a municipal road, which to me is unbelievable. Like, we have a municipal road, we should own the land under that municipal road. And what I've learned is in the process of an applicant dealing with any change to their property where they need to bring a survey forward, they discover sometimes, we've had two recent cases, where the land under the road is actually theirs and not the township's. And in this policy, we have interesting clauses such as Clause C, a fair market appraisal of the property under consideration shall be obtained by the municipality. And yet when we have dealt with these road situations recently, that concept has never surfaced. And I don't sit here trying to tell us what we should do or not do, but I can assure you that the comments that have come from Committee of Adjustment on the two very recent road applications where township roads cross private land, there was a very strong sentiment that the township should be covering all of the costs. So I think that we have a policy where we need to get alignment of that policy with the sentiments and decisions that are being made by Committee of Adjustment and by Planning Council, so that we don't have a gap. So that if somebody, for example, has a road crossing their land, and somebody from the township says, well, you have to give it to us because we have something else that says you have to give it to us, and we're not going to pay for it. And yet we have this policy that says fair market value. In fact, I will quote the mayor, not word for word, but in a discussion on a previous matter, the mayor actually verbalized that we should be talking about fair market value for a road. So I think that I just find that this policy which exists is very prescriptive about what we should be doing, but it gives the township an out, where it's like, if the township decides they want the road, then they'll pay for it, maybe. But if the township decides they don't really care about the road, then the applicant pays, which I think is ludicrous. If it's a township road, we need to own all the land under the road. So my request here is that that we as council, if you have read the resolution, is essentially that we as council direct staff to review this policy, review the kinds of decisions coming out of Planning Council and Committee of Adjustment, and come up with a definition that actually allows us to kind of do the honorable thing. We have a road crosses your property. We're not going to make you pay. We're not going to give you all kinds of land in lieu of whatever. We're going to solve that problem, and we're going to find a way to take ownership for that road. Thank you.
Thank you. I see C.O. Mariotti and Clerk Way. Who wants to go first? C.O. Mariotti, please.
Very briefly for the microphone, this is an operational policy that's been referenced here. And so in the purpose of the policy, it states that when it is in the best interest of the municipality to obtain ownership of the land, this is where we have a conversation as to whether there is a financial component to bringing the land into the ownership of the township for the ongoing operational purpose of the township. So I just wanted to clarify the context of this policy. It really is an operational policy.
Thank you. Clerk Way, please.
Just to add on to Cyril Mariotti's comments, it's unfortunate the way the policy kind of starts out, because I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Hazelton, in regards to us purchasing land and taking over roadways. The beginning of it under the purpose does make it sound like this is about existing roadways that are maintained by the township. However, when you read into the process and procedures, it's really more about if we were to purchase land for a new roadway versus an existing roadway. Those are two very different circumstances. Of course, if we were to decide a new roadway was to traverse across a parcel of someone's land, we would want to pay for and the fair market value of that land, whatever that might be per square meter, and compensate them accordingly. However, when there's a roadway that already crosses a parcel of land that is an existing roadway, there isn't a fair market value, unfortunately, because that land can't be sold to anyone other than the township. So there isn't a monetary value associated with that parcel of land. It is not usable land at that point in time by that individual or the parcel owner. And so when it comes to being able to assess that, you can't really assess it because there isn't a value. There's no one else that wants to own that road other than the municipality. And the township doesn't have the financial ability right now to go around purchasing all of those roadways back from people. I can't even begin to fathom what that cost might be from a municipal standpoint. So staff have been addressing these on a case-by-case basis as they have been approached to us. I mean, there was one recently that came to be through a severance, but that parcel was needed, that roadway needed to come into the township's ownership for that severance to even go forward, because they needed that frontage on proper roadway. And again, we are paying for those legal costs, so there's not an additional out-of-pocket cost to have that transferred to the township. And so that's kind of has been the approach by staff. I do understand this is a policy that is in place, but I think the wording of it needs to be updated to clarify the purpose, that this is about us creating new roadways and what that would be like, and creating, and paying and compensating an individual for that fair market value. But if a roadway is pre-existing, there is no fair market value to that land because it can't be purchased by anyone else, and there's already no value or use to the individual where that happens to traverse.
Thank you.
May I?
Yes.
So I accept your opinion. I have a very different opinion about the value of the land. It was pointed out to me in one case that the amount of land being severed was X percentage of the entire property. So probably that percentage of the market value of the entire property was a reasonable path to take. Having said that, I wanted to point out that first of all, I agree with you, this needs to be reworded, but I think that we need to take direction from decisions that have been made by Committee of Adjustment and Planning Council on these other matters. And one of the things here is under application and scope, it says explicitly that the policy applies to privately owned lands where a township-owned road travels across or encroaches it. So we don't actually own the road because it's private land. So we have the wording confused, but I would debate with you that this does apply to an existing road over private land. This has nothing to do with creating a new road over private land. This deals with exactly the circumstances that we have dealt with in the last several months on a couple of cases. So in my opinion here, and I agree with you, the wording needs to be cleaned up, but I don't think we need to lose sight of the fact that it currently addresses exactly these two cases that we've dealt with recently. And I think that it is incumbent on us to clarify this and for us to assume for 1 second that we should allow our road to cross private land. Oh my God, that is unbelievable as an attitude for us as a township. It's our township road. We better own it, and we better figure out how to do that. And if there's some costs associated with it, fine. We do it on a case-by-case basis. We're not going to go looking for all of these things. Do I agree with fair market value? Probably not. But the point is, we have a policy which has been getting in the way of dealing with residents who have stumbled across the fact that we have a township road crossing their property.
Okay. You want to respond to that before I just turn it over to council? All right, Councillor Bochek, I see your hand up, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Not often that I agree with Councillor Hazelton, but today I do. And being that our CAO has brought it to our attention that this is an operational matter, should not matter to the Planning Council. I would recommend that our planning department or our operations department reach out to Severn Township, where the Riverside Hotel was purchased by Bush's Marina, and the property went underneath Parks Canada property at the locks and underneath Port Severn Road across to the other side of the street. And at that point in time, there was compensation given. And I think there probably is a precedence that was set at that point in time by our neighboring township, and perhaps our operations department should look at that and consider Mr. Hazelton's approach to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
I too agree that I think what we need to do is have this policy properly reworded as has been recommended, and make sure that we don't run into this type of situation again. Having been sat on Committee of Adjustment and Planning Council when we've had these issues come forward, it's been rather astounding to realize that we're charging people so that we can have their land or something along those lines. It seemed really, really kind of backwards. And I think the rewording of this in the least and rewording it along the lines of what the recommendations from Councillor Hazelton would be a great idea. So it needs to be considered. Thank you.
Clerk White.
I would just like to clarify, we're not charging people to take ownership of the land. We're not making them pay us. We're paying the legal costs. We're just not paying them a purchase fee.
It seems to me that at a Committee of Adjustment, when we did have them, there was a parkland assessment, I believe.
Which is
that
different than a roadway.
I know, but it was
That's
all
not-
part of the same friggin' package.
They
It was-
tried to make it part of the same package, but that's not the same
Okay,
thing.
okay,
Yeah.
not the same thing, okay.
Councillor Graziano, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for Council Hazelton for bringing this forward. I will agree with my fellow councillors. I think that this is worthwhile in reviewing. We need to find a way to keep property owners whole, and if we don't, I think that that's just unfortunate. So with that said, I would agree, and I look forward to a future report from staff and or revisions. Thank you.
Clerk White.
If we move forward with paying property owners for roadways, that are municipally maintained as they come forward, because this is all over our municipality. It's not unique to the Township of Georgian Bay. I've dealt with this in other places. It happens very much in more rural settings than not, but places where roadways are created, where there's a path of least resistance, which is a huge consideration given the geographic nature of our community and the rocks. So even when there was road allowances established, historically, the roadways don't necessarily follow those. Cottages were created, roadways were created over time that would have been like a trail that are, have evolved into municipally owned roadways. We're not in control of when someone is coming forward, making an application for a severance, for example, which is historically how these have come forward most recently. If we aren't in control of people coming forward, but council's directing us to have a policy that forces us to pay for that land, we're not in control of the size of the parcel that's defaulted and decided for us. And whatever that calculation would be, where is that money going to come from for the township to pay for it? Are we going to budget, I don't know, like $500,000 every year in order to account for these funds to be transferred over? Like, I'm genuinely asking, if this is the approach, where is that money coming from? Because if I need to update the policy, then I need to be able to account for that.
Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I hope this hasn't been asked, this question, but or suggestion actually, just that I think it might be helpful for us to examine how this is being treated in a number of other municipalities in terms of developing our sort of future direction. If that's already been said, I apologize, but I think why reinvent the wheel? Why don't we go out and learn from others? Thank you.
Oh, if I may respond, generally speaking, we have been, the practice we've been following is what other municipalities do.
Thank you, and I just would suggest that we maybe look elsewhere just to make sure that there aren't some other solutions. And but generally, our practice is where you're saying so far that's what you've determined. Maybe we should look outside the District of Muskoka.
Councillor Predko.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So this morning I'm going to agree with Councillor Cooper on this. I think if we can just get confirmation more broadly that this is a standard approach that the township currently has is how it's handled throughout the province and other municipalities. I think that would be a satisfactory comfort level for me to make sure that we're handling this in a way that's appropriate and fair more broadly than just in our one township. But again, if the wording of the policy needs to be tightened up, I'm all for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no issue with the suggestion that we review that particular policy that Councillor Hazelton has identified and take into account our recent experiences and update our approach so we have some consistency. I am very concerned with the suggestion, the line that reads, so that all roads in the township that may have been on private lands is resolved, purchased to then be on land owned by the township. I think that's an admirable end goal, but I think it's also a significant financial trap that we might be setting if we're not careful. And not the least of which is if we have to go through trying to assess what that road is worth in the land and potential costs of not only surveying it, but trying to take the assessment and then going, I can imagine some landowners going to court over this and fighting for significantly higher value. Like, I just see it as being potentially very expensive for the township if we set out to acquire all the land under all township roads, because I have no idea how extensive it will be. Councillor Hazelton.
Yeah, I I understand your concerns. Nowhere in my document did I want to imply that we proactively go out and look for all of these anomalies. My intent was that they are coming to us by accident when a private property owner wants to do something on their property and they discover, oh my God, I have a township road crossing my property. I got to get that resolved before I can do something. So there's nothing that I intend here to do anything proactive. And then further to leverage what the clerk has already said, which is she said the land has no value. She says that the market value of it would be nothing because it has no value. The township would be the only user of it and you couldn't sell it. So I can't see it being a big cost. So maybe, anyways, the net point of it is these were a bunch of statements to try to provide better direction than just go fix it. I think collectively, I think we're at the point of consensus. Yeah, we need to go fix it. And these are statements that will help staff look at this and look at that and look at the other thing as they go and fix it and then bring it back.
If I may make a suggestion, I feel like the recommendations within this motion don't necessarily encompass a full review, and it's more of a focused scope. If staff were to go back and do a full review of the policy, I would prefer that the direction just be that this be referred to staff for review and be brought back. That way full research can be done in establishing best practices that maybe we're not aware of, versus this option narrows that scope from us being able to make those recommendations if we do a comparative.
So if I may, the intention here was not to make a bunch of work for staff and have something take 6 or 9 months to get done, because I don't know when the next application is going to come to Planning of Adjustment or Planning Council where, hey, somebody just discovered they got a township road crossing their property and we gotta get it resolved, and oh, we haven't started that process. It was to identify a couple of key principles. Number one, if we have a township road, it crosses private property, we should, number one, recognize that we need to do something to take ownership of that land. And there should be virtually no cost for the landowner in that process. And yes, there's a whole bunch of other language here, but again, there's nothing that is intending to go out and proactively find these things. So is it going to be a big cost for the township? Probably not. But for us to sit back and assume for a second that we shouldn't want to own our roads and the land under the roads, I just find that unbelievable that we might have that mindset. So that's,
you've made that particular point a few times.
Well, sometimes you do need to.
Okay. Councilor Bochek.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. You know, there was a point in time when we didn't have a procurement policy for selling shore road allowances. And I don't see how this is a lot different than that. We had to create a policy which said, if you want to purchase the shore road allowance, it's going to cost you X number of dollars per square foot. Okay. And that's changed into square meters or whatever. But if we were to create a policy where if there was land underneath our municipal road that you owned, there would be a set $2 per square foot or whatever it is, and we will cover the legal fees to make the landowner whole. That is not a lot different than the policy we have in selling our shore road allowances. So with the group of folks we have here on staff, I'm pretty sure with a little bit of consulting, we can come up with a policy that will treat our residents properly, very similar to what we've done with the shore road allowance purchases. Thank you. And I don't need a response to that.
Director Crackley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Subsection 5125, paragraph B of the Planning Act states that municipalities may require dedicated roadways, so they be dedicated by the applicants. And I think sometimes what people forget in the case of the Brisettes or in the case of the Ramazkis is that Section 53 of the Planning Act relies on Section 51 of the Planning Act. And so a consent application is a different form of subdivision. And regardless of what policies the municipality may have from an operations perspective, Planning Council, Committee of Adjustment have never been asked, to my knowledge, while I've been here, to contemplate those operational characteristics. They've been asked to exercise the municipality's authority under Section 51, subsection 25, paragraph B of the Planning Act. And I think the danger in creating a municipal policy that limits those powers is that you will not simply limit them for Mr. Brissett or Mr. Romaski. You will limit them for everyone, for the Oak Bays, for the, you name it. And then what is the implications of that? So if you're no longer able to require the proper dedication of roads to take place under the Planning Act, what is the outcome of that? So I understand that council is concerned with fairness, and that certainly can be addressed through specific decisions of either council or committee of adjustment. But in terms of creating a policy that limits the municipality's authority under the Planning Act, I worry that you're creating an amazing burden for your property owners if you take away those abilities under the Planning Act as a matter of policy.
Resolve this fairly quickly. Councilor Hayes.
So I hear you, and I can't disagree because you've got the planning knowledge, etc. What drives me nuts is we get an application at committee adjustment, as you've kind of alluded to, and somebody in staff says, well, we have the right to do this based on this clause and that clause, and basically, screw the resident. Like, to me, that is vile. And so
Okay.
in the, hold on, in the
No,
examples.
you hold on. Do not call actions of staff vile. That's inappropriate.
The outcome of the actions. No, I wasn't calling the actions of staff. I was calling that the direction that we get from staff, which is, no, you don't have to resolve that. Maybe we don't even need to own the road. Well, I just find that position is, pick a word. I don't care what the word is. We need to, if it on a case by case basis, as you have highlighted, we can resolve these things, then that's fine. But we need something in writing providing that kind of direction, because if you guys disappear tomorrow and we get a new slate of planning related people, now we're back to the same problem. There's no history, there's no guidance, and we come back to committee of adjustment and we have a new matter and we feel that resident is being treated unfairly. And so all I'm trying to do is, let's find a way.
You've already stated that half a dozen times. So, and we have more or less consensus among council that we would like staff to report back on this. So I think the most appropriate thing is to refer this to staff, because I think as we've heard from staff members, they are agreeing that there should be some updates. There's some distinction between whether it's operational or planning. I'm not sure where they're going to end up, but I think we should refer back to them to find out where they end up.
Well, it's kind of what the resolution that's directing staff to go off and do this. It's kind of what the resolution is.
So, well, if we just I'm concerned about some of the specific wording. Some staff have mentioned that. I think what the most appropriate thing to do is refer this to staff and let them work with it. Councilor Bochek.
Thank you. And I agree 100% that this needs to be referred to staff. But one of the things that I remiss in saying was, when the circumstance that happened in Severn Township, it was relayed to the family that if there was to be a death on the road or on the side of the road, that any lawyer would attach you to it because you're the property owner and you would have some shared liability. And we see that all the time when a lawyer says, okay, there was a death that happened in the ditch on the side of the road. It's a municipal road, but the resident owns that, and now they're named in the lawsuit. And I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to our residents, and that was what was happening over in Severn there. So I agree. Let's reach out to our neighboring townships, see what they've come up with, what they've had to do in the past, and how they've resolved their problems. Because we could be faced with a real issue going forward if we don't nip this in the bud.
All right,
Thank you.
let's conclude this. I will read the motion and ask all those in favor of referral when I'm finished the motion. Moved by Councillor Hazelton, second by Councillor Cooper. Whereas the township has a policy to deal with situations where municipal road crosses private property, and whereas this policy was written in 2016, and whereas this policy should be updated to reflect the current guidance received from members of Committee of Adjustment and members of Planning Council, now therefore be it resolved that Council directs staff to modify the clauses to recognize the following situation. A, where a property owner learns that a township road crosses their property, and B, where the property owner seeks to do something with their property that requires the status of the road to be resolved before proceeding with further actions, and that Council directs staff to acquire the property associated with the township road so that all roads in the township that may have been on private lands is resolved, purchased to then be on the land owned by the township, and that Council directs staff to have the township of Georgian Bay take full financial responsibility for the cost of surveying the road and the legal cost to transfer and register the property and any other direct costs, and the Council directs staff to honor the current clauses C and D when dealing with these matters. All those in favor of referral? And that is carried 5 to 2. All right, now we're going to go back to item A of new business, which is with regards to 951 Honey Harbor Road. Councillor Hazelton, that was your request.
So, first of all, thank you. Hopefully everybody has read this. And we have heard from staff that they believe that this is resolved. And I want to highlight through an example. You want to accomplish X, and you feel that the only way to accomplish X is to cave on Y so you can get X. And that's exactly what's happened here. The Brissettes have been trying to hold on to a belief that we committed, and we have it, verbally elsewhere, but that we committed that we would cover the costs of the Brissettes' legal costs for the registration of the road that crosses their property that we had to get sorted out. And so they have a cost of $4,000. We agreed ultimately that we would cover $3,000, and for some reason we wouldn't go the distance to $4,000. And they huddled in their home. They had spousal challenges to come up with what the right next step is, and they basically said, this can't go on anymore. We have to move forward with the township. We'll kind of swallow this thing for now.
Okay, and we've heard now from the clerk that actually it got resolved.
Hold on. We want to move forward with this matter. We want to get on with it. We don't want this thing dragging on anymore. But we hope that our counselor can come to council and say, can council approve the final $1,000 to establish some good faith for this resident?
Mm-hmm.
So did they, again, they feel like they're over a barrel. They have to move forward. They don't want to drag this thing on. It's been going on for years, and everybody knows who's dealt with this application. They have not been treated well through the process. Not necessarily by individual people, but the process has failed them. And we as a township have failed them. And we're at the final 11th hour, 59th minute. What's it going to take to make you happy? Oh, it's only $3,000. We're not going to give you $4,000. That's what your cost is.
Okay, you've made your point. Clerk White.
May I provide some context to this situation, Your Worship?
You may. Hopefully you won't be as lengthy as our council.
So as you're all aware, this matter has been before Planning Council and the Committee of Adjustment several times. The Brissettes have sought a severance and a zoning amendment for their property on Honey Harbor Road. The one corner of the road, as you're aware, contains the Severn lands, which also had a portion of Bass Bay Road. The severance in the zoning amendment have been approved, a condition of which was to have the portion of the municipal road transferred to the township, which was per the Committee of Adjustment. In May of I think that was the fall of 2022, and then in May in 2023, the Brisette sought compensation from the township because of what they felt was unfair treatment of the application and the process in which they had gone through. So at that time, Planning Council then did approve that the township would compensate and make arrangements for the surveying costs for the additional portions of Bass Bay Road being placed on the survey so it could be registered on title, plus the registration costs and legal fees for that title to be made. A refund for planning costs totaling $4,562.84, plus the waiving of the zoning bylaw amendment fee of $3,000. Staff then continued to work with the Brisettes as well as with planning and the clerk's office working together to complete this file. The clerk's office engaged our legal firm, HDR, who handles all of our road transfers and real estate transactions. Historically, our legal counsel have always been able to represent both parties in this circumstance, which means the township would have been directly responsible for all legal costs in that situation. However, in January of 2024, due to actions by Jody and Alden Brisette, our legal counsel was no longer able to offer their services and they needed to obtain independent legal counsel. At that time, our lawyer provided a letter to the Brisettes notifying them that they would not represent them on this matter and that the township would be willing to cover up to $2,000 in legal costs, which would be more than sufficient for the work required for the final transferring of the road, which would just need to be signing of acknowledgement and direction documentation that would have been prepared for by our legal counsel. At that same week, the refund of the $4,562.84 was transferred to the Brisettes. No further correspondence was received from the Brisettes on this matter until June. At that time, we heard from their lawyer, in which case they asked for $4,000 in legal fees to be paid for, and they had prepared documentation that was not required, which if they had reached out to our legal counsel or staff, we would have been able to provide clarification in advance. Staff said that we offered $2,000. They then pushed back up $4,000, as well as requesting an additional $4,000 to be compensated to cover planning application costs. Staff then said we would meet them in the middle and we would pay $3,000 in legal costs in order to see this matter settled and resolved, but we would not be paying any additional planning recovery fees. They originally said no to this offer, but they did come back on June 24th saying they accepted the $3,000 in legal cost compensation and that money has been paid.
So that makes the motion in front of us redundant in that the final line was council authorized township to compensate legal costs to the applicants up to $4,000, and they've accepted a $3,000 payment.
So you think, if I may, you're thinking that because they've accepted that in their minds they're whole. And I can tell you that's not the case. They feel like they're over a barrel, and if they don't, that, as their lawyer has pointed out to them, they don't accept this, then they could lose their severance altogether. So this is, okay, we're at a point where for $1,000 to solve this, given the hundreds of thousands of dollars we've spent in all kinds of other legal matters, and we're trying to deal with a little bit of customer service here, and I just cannot understand why for $1,000 to make them happy, if that's possible, that we wouldn't do it. That's where we are.
They've accepted.
They've accepted so that they can get on with the job. I can guarantee you, in their minds, they haven't accepted.
All right. I think this discussion has gone on long enough. I don't understand why we would pass a motion on a matter that has already been settled.
It's not settled.
So I'm going to ask you, Councillor Hazelton, if you're willing to withdraw this motion.
I'm not.
Okay. And Councillor Cooper, are you still seconding this motion? Well, that's with a lot of enthusiasm. All right. Clerk Way, can we pass, if this motion gets passed? I mean, we're not out of legal line, if I can call it that? I mean,
If the motion is passed, we'll consult with our legal counsel to have the additional $1,000 transferred.
moved by Councillor Hazelton, second by Councillor Cooper. Whereas council is supportive of finalizing the applications and transfer of a portion of Bass Bay Road to the Township of Georgian Bay. And whereas Planning Council Resolution P 2023-033 authorized a refund cost of $4,560.84 for planning costs and for the Township of Georgian Bay to cover legal costs with the use of a municipal lawyer and waive the application fees for a zoning bylaw amendment application. Now therefore be it resolved that council authorizes the Township to compensate legal costs to the applicant, Jodian Alden Brissett, in the amount of up to $4,000. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. That passes 4-3. Be it resolved that Planning Council adopt bylaw 2024-071 to confirm the proceedings of the July 9th, 2024 council meeting. All those in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved the Planning Council is now adjourned at 12:43 p.m. until August 13th, 2024 at 9 a.m. or the call of the chair. All those in favor? That is carried. Now, before you leave, next on our agenda is a special council meeting that was originally scheduled for 2 o'clock. I'm going to suggest we do it at 1:30, start at 1:30. No? Okay. Do we dare try to sneak a cow meeting in after lunch?
We also can't do that.
No.
Because we did provide notice for yesterday's time transfer and today's is scheduled.
Normally flexible with these things.